All right. Good morning, everyone. We're just giving you like the minute and 48-second warning to come on in and have a seat, and we're going to kick things off. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. I think you guys look how I feel, right? Or no, I feel how you look. I know it's horrible. Anyway, good morning. Uh, the true GRPCRs are the ones that make it on Sunday mornings, right? And we are all here, so congratulate yourself for being up and probably relatively functional. So it's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. I am Charlie Cook. I have a show called Riding Shotgun with Charlie, and I drive people around the country and talk to them in the car. I make videos playing the trumpet, shooting a gun with one hand, and playing the trumpet with one hand and shooting a gun with the other. So I like to tell people I'm trying to bring fun ownership to gun ownership. So it's great to be here. Today's going to be fabulous. We've got a quick, short morning. Yesterday was truly amazing. To me, the Gun Rights Policy Conference weekend, I've been telling everyone all weekend that it really tickles my ADD because there's so many people to talk to and so many people to catch up with. And I will see people in my regular civilian life, and I'll forget their names all the time. But when I come here, most of the people I see, I remember their names. So it's great to be here. I absolutely love this weekend. It's like the Super Bowl for gun folks, or Super Bowl weekend, because it's a party all the time, and we get down to business and we have a great time. So it's great to see you all here this morning. And let's kick things off. Our first speaker this morning is Clark Aposian. He is dubbed Utah's Top Gun by the Salt Lake Tribune. He's one of the most influential voices in Western firearms. He serves as the chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council and represents the National Shooting Sports Foundation. He's the host of the nationally syndicated iHeartRadio show, Gun Radio Utah, No Apologies. We were just talking. I said he's got 2 minutes to figure out what he's going to talk about. Let's have a round of applause for Clark, please. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, sir.
I got to put my little Jesus figurine up there that I got from Rael with Women for Gun Rights. If he would just stay up. Come on. Okay, there you go. He's watching you. Good morning, Salt Lake City. On behalf of the Utah Shooting Sports Council, we want to thank Alan Gottlieb and his tremendous team for choosing Utah to hold their 40th annual Gun Rights Policy Conference, and congratulate them on 4 decades of advocacy, defending and enlarging the right to keep and bear arms. Thank you. Where is Alan? Let's see. Thank you very much. All right, now, but I'm not done. So, creating opportunities for advocacy. Why we need to create opportunities. What are the challenges to do this? And different ways to do it. So I'm just going to go through a few of those. An advocate is a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause. We are all, every one of us here, are advocates. So now we need to get more of us. All right. A quick shout out to my wonderful wife, who's watching online, probably somewhere. She better be. Whose idea of advocacy is to wear pro-gun T-shirts at family events, even though most of her family are left-leaning. And so, and I sent her a picture and I said, Casey Jane, you would be amazed at how GRPC has changed over the years. And I sent her a picture of the line getting into FanX. So, um, so, so folks, we've got to expand our reach. How come? One reason for me, I'm getting old. Okay. And I would love to retire in the winter when the legislative session starts. I would love to be in Costa Rica, something like that. So we're getting old. And unfortunately, as we age, we lose the connection, the effectiveness of our message to the younger generations. In speaking with my niece, Izzy, she's 19, and she uses terms like sus and ratchet and Ohio. I don't know. And so how many boomers do we have here? Come on. We all know you're a boomer. All right, very good. So you know what I mean. So the public landscape, it's shifting. Many Americans, if they're not absolutely diabolically hand-wringing bedwetters, they're neutral or they're uninformed about gun rights. Many of them are just only exposed to the gun debate in memes or on social media or the news. And media narratives, misinformation that they spew is, make no mistake, it's very purposeful. It dominates the public perception, and we know this. How many times do we have to explain the difference? Sometimes yelling at the TV, but explain the difference between a semi-automatic and a full automatic and a fully semi-automatic. Anyway, so how many times do we hear about a poll conducted that says most Americans want universal background checks? And we think, who are they asking this of? What do they say? Do they even know? Not. And the answer is no, they don't know. What if we were to not just educate those folks, but enlist them in the cause? Because remember, most of them are either neutral or just don't know. They're not necessarily, like I like to say, the hand-wringing bedwetters of that. So each year, the Utah Shooting Sports Council invites the local media to a class where we teach the very basics of firearms and ammunition. We say what it can do, what it can't do. We give them the terminology, and then we have them update their contact list so that when some wackadoodle waves a gun around in Utah or somewhere else, they'll give us a call rather than grab the first person walking out of a gun store to find out what the rest of the gun community thinks about guns. So how can unconventional advocacy pay off? I was speaking to I have spoken to so many extremely interesting people here at GRPC, and I always do. This man was, he was by all rights, he was he was an engineer, so he's kind of a genius in my book. And I was talking to him, and he said he had occasion to work with young tech folks in a predominantly liberal genre type of environment, or at the very least, they were left-leaning. They were studying engineering, or they were engineers. And he conducted a series of actual classes on off company time and that, of building an AR-15 from scratch for a project. And when finished, each of them had their own rifle of their own making and had become enlisted in the cause. Our mission should never be just to defend the Second Amendment. It should be more than just outreach. It should be expansion. With expansion comes an understanding of our gun rights. All right, creating opportunities. We know it's commonplace to see groups like A Girl and a Gun and Women for Gun Rights. So fantastic. Where are they? Let's see. I'm trying to see where Rael is. Anyway, it wasn't always so, was it? We didn't always see that segment of the gun-owning population represented. They were born out of someone's advocacy to reach a segment that had been overlooked, discounted, and underrepresented. Now look at them go. To the point the Utah Shooting Sports Council literally relies on their involvement in getting legislation passed each year at the Utah House and Senate. How do we create new opportunities for public engagement? Localize the message. We're so used to the big picture. Get local. Tie Second Amendment rights to local concerns, to safety, to self-reliance, to community resilience, to preparedness. Okay? Not community organizing. We can say it some other way. So when writing an article or you're doing your podcast or your YouTube, as if you are not talking to the choir of gun owners, rather like you're talking to your community council. Your words are going to be different. They will resonate more with the people we need to reach out to, and we'll be able to educate. So I'm thinking, host a town hall, host a workshop, host a Know Your Rights forum in a library, even a community center. Then we've got to humanize the movement. This is where I really need a lot of help, to humanize, to empathize. We are data-driven. We want the facts. We want the data. We want the figures, and we win with those inside. We know. It doesn't always work with everybody else. We've got to take those facts, those figures, that data, and temper them with some emotion. Now, the other side uses just emotion for the most part and then skews the facts. But we're just going to use facts and temper it with emotion. For instance, we know that inner cities have a hugely disproportionate amount of deaths by homicide. It's just true. You can give the figures, you can give the data. Include, when you do that, though, when you talk about that, a humanizing, heartfelt concern that if these inner city community leaders don't admit what is going on and stop blaming the government, stop blaming their society for this, they will lose most of an entire generation of young men from that borough. Identify and highlight diverse and disparate voices. These voices are often underrepresented, including women, minorities, veterans, first-time gun owners, single moms, young adults. So you break the stereotypes of the old white men with guns, and you'll build empathy. All right, partner outside the bubble. Collaborate with non-gun organizations, civil libertarians, domestic violence groups, mental health, hiking, outdoor people. I can guarantee you they are already talking about guns. They just don't know the facts. And usually they're not talking about guns in the best light. Educate as you collaborate. Bring an instructor when you talk to them and use it as an opportunity to teach a self-defense or a preparedness course. And then frame gun rights to create advocacy as a broader freedom and safety conversation. Never discount the youth. Let me tell you about an experience. So there's a group called ETGAR 36, started kind of in Georgia. And what they would do is the leaders would take about 40 14 to 17-year-old, primarily Jewish kids, and they'd start them on the East Coast, and they'd put them on a bus, and they would travel for 36 days across the United States, and they would stop at key geographical locations that had something to do with race relations or abortion or equal rights or environment and guns. And they would stop in Colorado, and they would learn about anti-gun stuff. They'd watch things like Bowling for Columbine, and they'd listen to somebody talk about that. Then they would come to Utah. And for 15 years, I had them for about 3 hours one time a year. And we'd talk about guns unapologetically. And then I'd go out shooting. They weren't allowed to shoot or hold guns, but I did. So in the years since then, I have had many, many occasions to talk to them. And this has been, like I said, over 15 years. They are adults now. And now Several of them have said it was that exposure, that education about guns that caused them to open their minds, to change their minds, reject the biased media. When they would hear it, they would know, hey, Clark said something different about that. To the extent that many of them are gun owners and even 2A advocates in their own states. If you have access to social media, which of course you do, encourage your students, your group, your membership to create short-term video reels, myth-busting reels, simple educational content. Keep it short because the generation right now likes it very, very short and concise, super short. Like, what is a semi-auto rifle? Something like that. Use platforms like Instagram or TikTok, if TikTok is still going to be around, as long as it's and YouTube to reach the younger audiences. And perhaps your brand of advocacy isn't any of these things. Maybe it's making phone calls, text messages, emails about an upcoming legislative hearing on gun issues. That's fine. Not everybody can storm the palace gates with pitchforks and burning torches, but how about organizing a local gun range cleanup or a shooting area cleanup, and then drop a dime to local news about these gun owners and their environmental efforts? The advocacy will pay off positively in public perception. All right. I'm really going to do that. I'm going to try to beat that clock. Audit your current advocacy. Are you teaching new people or just reinforcing your existing beliefs to the same choir? Think about who you're reaching with your message. Can you expand it? Mentor a new advocate. Bring someone younger, less experienced into the fold, an intern, or mentor them. Host a day at the Capitol, show them around. Hold one event per year aimed at the unconverted, and challenge yourself to have one meaningful conversation per week with someone outside the movement. Okay. The Second Amendment doesn't defend itself. It relies on us, not to just protect it, but to promote it. So let's go beyond the choir and let's build a chorus. Thank you.
So it did sound like you knew what he was talking about more than 2 minutes before he started, right? All right. Excellent job. Thank you. Our next speaker or next presenter is one of the most influential voices in the Second Amendment community. She's the president and CEO of A Girl and a Gun. She went across the street to FanX and became the newest BFF with Punky Brewster. What makes her voice especially powerful in political circles is her personal journey from supporting gun control to becoming a staunch defender of the Second Amendment. She's honored to have been awarded the Defender of Liberty from SAF. She serves on the board of directors for the Women for Gun Rights. And as she likes to put it, moms who make demands to take our gun rights don't speak for moms like me. Let's welcome Robin Sandoval.
Right.
Is it good?
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning. Across the country, women are taking ownership of their personal safety like never before. Over the past decade, the number of female gun owners has grown remarkably. Today, 1 in 4 women in the United States is a gun owner, 1 in 4. And that's roughly 25%, but more than 29% of concealed carry holders are women. This isn't about politics. It isn't about ideology. It's about being prepared, feeling capable, and taking charge of your life. As the president and CEO of A Girl and a Gun, I see this every day. Women are saying, I will not be a victim, and they're taking action. One interesting trend is when women enter the firearms world. According to research, men typically purchase their first firearm at age 19. Women typically become gun owners at age 27. That's an 8-year age gap. In our girl and gun community, women often begin even later, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Why the later start? There are many reasons that spur women into gun ownership, but the reality is that many women don't typically first come to firearms because of sport or recreation. They typically come to firearms because life demands it. Because personal safety, motherhood, or a life-changing event made gun ownership attractive or essential. And once women step into the firearms world, something remarkable happens. They move quickly, from first-time shooter to confident defender, often in months, not years. This journey is supported by credentialed, welcoming environments where women can ask questions, learn skills, and grow. That's exactly what organizations like A Girl and a Gun provide. Since our founding in 2011, we have had consistent year-over-year growth. This post-pandemic growth continues to reflect this demand. As you can see, in 2021, we trained more than 35,000 women, 2022, more than 38,000, 2023, more than 39,000. Last year, we trained more than 45,000 women, and we're continuing to see that trend this year in 2025. Even more revealing, many members have owned their firearms for 10 years or more, but have trained significantly within the past 5 years. This mirrors data from the spike in gun sales we saw in the pandemic, but also reflects the rise in women's participation as we're still seeing that they're coming to the range for structured skill-building experiences. Within our membership, ownership is strong. 83% of our women own their own pistol, 38% own their own rifle, 24% own their own shotgun. 11% claim to rent or borrow firearms from a friend or from the range, which offers growth opportunities for ranges, manufacturers, and FFLs to serve these first-time buyers. This steady rise demonstrates that women are investing in their skills and their confidence, transforming themselves along the way. And this transformation naturally leads to addressing the threats that they face head-on. Violence against women is real. The statistics are sobering. 1 in 4 women experiences severe physical violence in her lifetime. 1 in 10 women is sexually assaulted, and some would say that's a very conservative estimate. 1 in 7 has been stalked. And firearms are often involved. 67% of intimate partner homicides of women involve a firearm. About 2% of A Girl and a Gun members report using their firearm in self-defense of themselves or someone in their home, and it's mostly in home invasions. Many defensive encounters don't make headlines because no shots are fired. In fact, surveys estimate that nearly 2 million defensive gun uses occur each year, often going unreported. The presence of a trained, prepared woman is often enough to prevent a crime before it begins, and the confidence that comes from training, knowing you are ready, is life-changing. Checking to see what slide I'm on, I apologize. The peace of mind that comes from training is immeasurable. When women know that they're prepared, even if they never use their firearm, often it offers safety, confidence, and self-reliance every single day. Numbers are important, but stories offer this more vividly. There are the concealed carry stats. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Somehow my slides are off, I apologize. But I'm gonna advance forward and tell you about Lita. Lita's one of our members. When we first met Lita, she was a meek school teacher, quiet, reserved, and meek. But she did all the right things. She came to training, she asked the right questions, she built her skills step by step. When we talked about hardening your home, she listened. When we offered scenario-based training, she learned verbal judo and honed her mindset. When we launched our marksmanship program, she progressed through the levels, gaining confidence with tighter groupings. You can look at her target. I'm a proud mama for that. And then, when the unthinkable happened, a group of men began kicking in her front door. She was not helpless. She was in control. She took charge. She told her husband the plan, and she was equipped to protect her family. Because she had reinforced the door as she learned in training, the men couldn't get inside and they left. Later, she posted the ring cam footage to her Nextdoor app to alert her neighbors. And one woman reached out to her saying that was her teenage son and his friends. Some teenagers were just playing around. Lita, being the school teacher, invited those boys over and their parents, and she told them what was happening on the other side of the door and what would have happened had that door come open. She took it as a learning opportunity to teach those young men and to hopefully make an impression on them. But today, Lita carries herself with confidence and self-assurance. It started on the range, but now it is in so many other areas of her life. She is no longer timid. She is transformed. This story illustrates the broader truth. Women are not just becoming gun owners, they are becoming leaders, mentors, and role models through firearms training. These are not abstract numbers. They influence real decisions and save lives. Within A Girl and a Gun, 73% of members report that national statistics on violence have influenced their decision to train. Over 70% of female gun owners nationwide cite protection as their primary reason to own a firearm. But more than protection, it's about confidence, self-reliance, and personal authority. I think this is where our slides got off a little bit. I'm going to jump back here. Dr. John Lott's research shows that a woman carrying a concealed handgun reduces the murder rate for women by 3 to 4 times more than a man carrying a concealed handgun reduces the murder rate for men. 3 to 4 times. Prepared women save lives, sometimes their own, sometimes the lives of others. Understanding these statistics can help explain why many women make deliberate choices about gun ownership. Let's look more closely at how domestic violence intersects with these decisions. It may seem paradoxical that guns are the leading method of homicide and domestic violence, but they're also the biggest motivator for women to learn to train. A researcher at UC Davis noted that most mass shootings have some connection to domestic violence. Women understand that potential attackers are often armed, and to level the playing field, they choose to be prepared as well. The numbers speak volumes. 70% of women with concealed carry permits have attained them in the last 5 years. Within A Girl and a Gun, only 14% of our 8,000 members do not have a concealed carry permit. 31% say they can't carry at work, but they carry the majority of the time elsewhere. When asked how recent high-profile murders have affected their training, only 15% of our women said that they were unaffected. More than half say they train regularly because of these tragedies, and nearly 30% reported that the recent events of the past few weeks have motivated them to train and carry more often. Women are turning awareness into action, creating networks of preparedness and support that extend beyond themselves. Women are buying guns not just for safety, but for independence, confidence, and connection. National research confirms that women are the fastest growing demographic of new gun buyers. A 2021 study found that nearly half of all gun owners since 2019 are women. Between 2012 and 2022, the number of women with concealed carry permits increased 115% faster than men's. Within A Girl and a Gun, 47% prioritized defensive training, 32% preferred training and support from other women. And family involvement is central. 86 report shooting with their family, 37% specifically with their spouse. However, 28% of our members are the only shooter in their household, which is a trend that we're seeing rising year over year. Women are often the leaders in household safety, introducing firearms into the family, shaping the family budget, activities, and safety decisions. Our Girl in the Gun membership is diverse. 63% are married or partnered, 18% single, 13% divorced. Politically, 39% claim to be conservative, 32% mixed or unreported. So this movement crosses political lines. It's about culture, create community, and self-reliance. As women build confidence in community, the question becomes, how does this translate into real-world readiness? Because training is more than marksmanship. It's about capability, confidence. Data shows that 96% of our members say that training has helped them feel confident with their firearms. 75%, I want to say this again, 75% of our members report that the confidence that they experience on the range has translated into other areas of their lives. 75% feel that way. Women are becoming instructors, mentors, and leaders. They are standing taller because they know they can. This transformation ties all the elements together: delayed entry into the firearms world, rapid skill development, community, preparedness, and personal safety that all reinforce to each other to create capable and confident women. The rise in women's gun ownership is not a trend, it's a transformation. Women may enter the firearms community later than men, but remember, once they do, they move quickly with passion, like all we do. From first-time shooter to trained, licensed, and confident defender, protector of themselves, their families, their communities, and their values. Women are not just owning guns, they are claiming safety, confidence, agency, and authority. They're redeeming what it means to be prepared, building safer households, and inspiring the next generation. We're not just training women to handle firearms. We're training them to think critically, lead boldly, and live confidently. That's the story of a girl and a gun, and that's the story of all women in firearms today. Thank you.
All right. That truly is an amazing story about Lita, isn't it? I'm sure it happens in other places too. Maybe they don't get it on video. Our next speaker is known as the gun writer. He's been writing about the Second Amendment, firearms, the firearm industry, and the gun culture for more than 15 years. He's the chief editor of SAF's Investigative Journalism Project and a proud board member of Florida Carry. Until recently, he was an editor of a daily newspaper in Florida. Before becoming a newspaper editor, he was an investigative journalism reporter at newspapers in 3 states and 1 U.S. territory. Before becoming a journalist, he was a police officer. Before that, he served in the Army. He's earned more than a dozen national journalism awards as a reporter, 3 medals of honor as a cop, and he's also a tactical shooter and a proud member of the Staccato cult. Let's welcome. You can afford them down there, Jared. Let's welcome Lee Williams, please.
Good morning. I am the Second Amendment, and I am editor of the Second Amendment Foundation's Investigative Journalism Project, a position I've held for nearly 5 years. Our mission is to showcase underreported stories and debunk misinformation from opponents of our right to keep and bear arms. We do this through daily reporting, investigations, analysis, and commentary on the policy, politics, and culture and business of guns in America. Before joining SAF, I had an interesting series of careers, although I've never been happier than I am now. I must stress, though, that I did serve as an interrogator in the U.S. Army. Therefore, I find it somewhat easy to tell when someone's lying to me, whether they're telling the truth or when they're not. I give you this bit of background information because I want to be very clear about how it pertains to a particular series of stories that I am still writing for the Second Amendment Foundation. Since I joined SAF, I've written and published about 565 stories, but there are 29 stories that are focused solely on one topic, on one person, and that's Patrick Tate Adamiak. And friends, Tate is definitely telling the truth. To be clear, I have never seen a more screwed up or illegal mess than the ATF's persecution of Patrick Tate Adamiak. This, friends, is the worst thing the ATF has ever done that didn't involve killing innocent Americans. It is without any doubt the worst prosecution the ATF has ever made, period, hands down. I should also point out this occurred during the Biden administration when the ATF had no oversight or accountability, when they were totally pro-arrest, pro-get-the-gun owner, when they hit homes in multiple states, regardless of the innocence of the alleged suspect, regardless of the facts of the case. Patrick Tate Adamiak, who is now 31, was an active duty Navy E6 Master at Arms before the ATF decided to get involved in his life. More importantly, Adamiak had been accepted to start Naval Special Warfare training in California. That's SEAL school for those of us who have never been in the Navy. He'd also been told he would receive a commission and go from E6 to O1. Do you have any idea the opportunities, how rare these opportunities are for an active duty enlisted sailor? Adamiak operated his own website for years on which he sold legal gun parts, not firearms, not destructive devices. To be clear, Adamiak only sold gun parts and militaria, none of which could ever fire or go bang. Most of the items he purchased off of other pro-gun websites. Adamiak became one of Gunbroker's top 500 dealers until the ATF decided to target him personally and lie under oath about the facts of the case. Now, unless somebody takes some action quickly, and changes a whole bunch of unconstitutional wrongs, Adamiak will be held in prison until the year 2042. How did the ATF find Adamiak? They used a worthless confidential informant, or CI, who bought some allegedly illegal gun parts from Adamiak, parts that the ATF quickly decided were illegal, even though today you can still buy them without any ID off of dozens of pro-gun websites. This CI used to own a machine gun shop until he ran into some legal trouble and was subsequently barred from owning firearms. Adamiak told me, and I quote, "The ATF raided his home, found a gun, and charged him with felon in possession. Later, he kept asking me for a machine gun, which I never got him. I got him a shroud off a gunbroker. The ATF paid him around $8,000 for my case alone. To be clear, I never sold a single item that qualifies as a firearm or receiver or needs an FFL, only non-regulated gun parts." After the deal with the CI, more than 40 federal agents and law enforcement officers raided Adamiak's home and a rental property he owned. Agents came from the ATF, FBI, HIS, NCIS, SWAT, bomb squad, and local police. The agents seized about 35 firearms from Adamiak's personal collection and labeled them, and I quote, "suspected machine guns and destructive devices." However, nothing the ATF found during their search of Adamiak's home was illegal. Adamiak told me, and I quote, "It is my opinion and that of my family that the ATF realized they had messed up after they didn't find a single illegal weapon. So they completely reinterpreted the statutes and implemented a new rule, a new way to spin the jury and get me convicted. They manufactured crime to convict me," he said. In other words, the ATF made up their own crimes. Can you believe that? Still angry about that. At first, this ATF offered Adamiak a deal. He could plead guilty to possessing illegal weapons and only serve 7 years in federal prison. But he didn't want any of that, so he went to trial. Unfortunately, his trial was a joke, thanks to ATF Firearms Enforcement Officer Jeffrey Bodell, a former gun dealer and gunsmith who went to work for the ATF for reasons unknown. Adamiak's trial was the first time Bodell had ever testified under oath. Bodell's preparations for the trial were clearly illegal, but nothing was more harmful to Adamiak than a toy Sten submachine gun that he had owned. Adamiak bought the toy Sten Mark II submachine gun from a local gun show. He paid $75 for the non-firing Spanish replica, or toy, which is made by a company called Denix in Spain and still sold online. This illegal toy, Adamiak believes, is one of the main reasons why he is serving a 20-year prison sentence, because eventually, using a real Sten submachine gun bolt and a real Sten barrel and some electrical tape, Bodell was able to load one round by hand and get the toy to fire one live 9mm round. Once he fired a single round, Bodell labeled it as a machine gun, even though the toy wouldn't accept any magazines, any real magazines. Additionally, the ATF became fixated on a replica M240 machine gun that he had, which couldn't even chamber a live round because it too was a toy, and some demilled RPGs that Tate had bought earlier at a flea market in San Diego. The RPGs had rocket-propelled grenades, had holes drilled into their pipes and the guts removed from the handles. To be clear, they were not capable of firing anything, but that didn't stop Bodell from reworking Tate's tubes, taking needed parts from ATF's live RPGs and installing them in a subcaliber kit. Once restored, the ATF managed to squeeze off one live 7.62 by 39mm round, which unfortunately was all the jury needed to see. All these legal RPGs became destructive devices. Bodell also test fired 5 of Adamiak's very expensive and extremely collectible legal semi-auto pistols, which fire from an open bolt. All he could achieve was semi-automatic fire, but that didn't stop him. He classified all 5 highly sought-after pistols as machine guns. These legal semi-autos, these semi-autos are still legal, very collectible, and legally sold like any other firearm. Today, one can fetch between $3,000 to $5,000, and they can still be purchased just like any other legal firearm, with only an ATF form 4473 and a background check. Bodell's lies were very effective in this prosecution, unfortunately. He actually turned toys into machine guns, toys into firearms, legal demilled RPGs into destructive devices, and 100% legal semi-autos into machine guns. All of what Bodell insisted were illegal items are still sold legally online: inert RPGs, toy Stens, submachine gun receivers, and especially open bolt semi-autos. In fact, not one of these items Bodell examined is illegal to own, except evidently by Adamiak. The ATF and Bodell even tried to get Adamiak an additional 10 years in prison for flat pieces of metal. Adamiak was charged with illegally possessing 977 machine guns for Mac flats, which are nothing more than flat pieces of metal. Fortunately, former ATF senior official Dan G. O'Kelly testified about these charges and explained the federal rules as they applied to the case. O'Kelly was able to prove that these flat pieces of stamped metal did not legally qualify as firearm receivers, much less machine guns. His testimony saved Adamiak from additional 10 years in prison. O'Kelly strongly believes that Adamiak should be a free man. These flats are still legally sold online today without an FFL or any other paperwork because they're flat pieces of metal. O'Kelly's victory saved Adamiak from being sentenced to 30 years. Instead, he was sentenced to 20 years behind bars, and he is currently inmate number 952-52509 at FCI Fort Dix. That's a Federal Correctional Institute in New Jersey. He shares a cell with 11 other inmates. Okay, a couple things you should know. The U.S. Navy never took any action against Adamiak. They allowed his enlistment to expire while he was in jail, and he was given an honorable discharge. What does that say? Adamiak never sold a single operable firearm from his website, not one. His former colleagues, who are now Navy chiefs, senior chiefs, remain fully dedicated to seeing him get out of prison. I got a call and an email from one of them about 10 months ago. He wanted me to do an investigative story, so I began looking into the case. I quickly found that neither Adamiak nor his former colleagues ever stretched the truth, not once. They never described events in a way to benefit him. Not once. They never altered or deleted the truth. In fact, these senior listed guys were by far the best and most reliable sources I've ever worked with as a journalist. And Adamiak was the best source I have ever encountered in 25 years of journalism, by far. I was able to publish our first story on January 29th of this year, which was titled ATF Lied to Convict Sailor, Now Serving 20 Years in Prison for Selling Legal Gun Parts. We've examined every single bit of the story since then and have published 28 more, which you can find all of them at saf.org. Nowadays, I get dozens and dozens of emails and calls asking the same question. Will Adamiak be freed? Quite frankly, my answer is always, I don't know. He had an appeal September 11th. His appellate attorney, who did not represent him during his initial trial, thank God, only got about 15 minutes to tell his story and encapsulate all that was wrong with his trial and conviction and subsequent 20-year sentence before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. The three appellate judges gave no clue what they will do. Matt LaRosary, Adamiak's appellate attorney, was asked about whether the guns were partially disassembled, as the state claimed, and if the guns were taken apart, could they be put back together? LaRosary replied to the judges, and I quote, "These were not taken apart. These were not weapons. They were parts. Second Amendment protected accoutrement. You have to show the history and tradition for locking a man up for 20 years, and they didn't try. You have to address arms before the court. What is before the court right now are not arms. It's a pile of parts." The appellate judges should issue their verdict in a couple of months. What they will decide to do is not known. Adamiak has another plan. He's been trying to get a pardon from President Donald Trump. President Trump has already pardoned people who've admitted to breaking the law. Remember, Adamiak never broke any law. That last part is very telling and very truthful. Patrick Tate Adamiak did nothing wrong. He broke no laws. He should not be in prison. After all, he'd rather be leading a platoon of SEALs into harm's way. What the ATF did to him is the real crime. They lied. They unlawfully manufactured false evidence. The ATF, especially their firearms enforcement officer, are the real criminals in this case. Patrick Tate Adamiak did nothing. If he is somehow released through his appeal or by a presidential pardon, he plans to re-enlist in the U.S. Navy and continue his fight against those who would want to harm our country, which I find incredibly noble. I spoke to Tate last week, told him about this speaking opportunity today, and he said this to all of you, and I quote, "Thanks for taking a few minutes to listen to my case. This could happen to anyone if we let it go unchecked," he said. A simple, innocent hobby of collecting arms and memorabilia destroyed my life. I won't stop fighting until the truth is heard, and I am free. Every story I've ever written about Tate and every future update will be posted at saf.org. Thank you for listening to my rant.
You know, when you hear stories like this and realize that this gentleman did nothing wrong, you start to think, oh my God, this could be me for something or for nothing. So it's great to have Lee reporting on this, and great to have, great to get this story out. And we all need to realize this and hear about these things. Our next speaker is the Director of Legal Operations here at SAF. He's a practicing attorney and a graduate of the George Washington University and Widener Law School. He brings 5 years of direct experience in the Second Amendment advocacy space, including the legal director of operations for a liberty-based advocacy nonprofit, as well as a decade of experience in management, marketing, and PR. As the Director of Legal Operations, he is responsible for the oversight of SAF's legal operations to include litigation inception and management, tracking active cases, educating the public, and cultivating SAF's attorney referral network. Let's welcome Bill Sack.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I can't see anybody. I can just see a light in my face. That's great. So I'm Bill Sack. I'm Director of Legal Operations here at SAF. What I'd like to do with my time this morning is give you all a bit of a snapshot of what it is we do with y'all's money uh, with our legal program. I think the feather in the cap of the Second Amendment Foundation is our litigation program. I manage that program uh, from inception of cases, deciding what cases we're going to bring, when and where, managing those cases through the pendency of the ongoing litigation, and then figuring out when each of those conclude what it is we're going to do next. So my goal here in the next 14 minutes and 23 seconds is to give you a little bit of an idea of what it is we did this year, what it is we plan to do in the future, and how it is we got here to a degree. So it has been my pleasure to direct the SAF legal portfolio in 2025. The state of the litigation program here is, I believe, as strong as it's ever been. We're currently involved in 51 pieces of active litigation all over the country. We currently, that includes 10 new cases that have been filed since we were all here at GRPC last year, or 9 in the last calendar year. We expect another handful to be filed by the end of the year, so I think we'll easily clear a dozen for 2025, and that's just for new cases. We have made major strides in a number of key issue areas, which we'll talk about. That includes young adult rights, whether it's the ability of adults under 21 to acquire, possess, or carry firearms, as well as the possession rights for individuals who live in public housing, the dismantling of the National Firearms Act, and that's something that we'll talk about, as well as the ongoing hobbling of the California gun control behemoth. We remain firmly camped out on the Supreme Court steps. We are proud to report. We were all certainly disappointed that our Snope case, our melon assault weapons ban case, was not picked up by the Supreme Court last year. But we do currently have 3 pending petitions for certiorari with the Supreme Court, and we'll talk about those cases a little bit. Those are Brown, Lara, and Viramontes, and we'll talk about those briefly. We certainly hope that the Supreme Court chooses to take one of those. Last year in Snope, we got perhaps the strongest indication in the last decade or so that the court intends on taking a Second Amendment case again in the hopefully immediate future. I like to think about our litigation program strategically in terms of 3 primary buckets: the who, what, and where of the Second Amendment. So if you look at the who category of the Second Amendment, we have focused largely on adults under 21 because they, as a subset of the people, face perhaps the most egregious limitations on their rights in multiple jurisdictions around the country. Multiple states limit their ability to acquire firearms, either in total or just handguns, as well as their ability to possess them in some instances, as well as to carry them. So you will see that we have filed, I believe, 8 of our 9 cases that we filed this year alone were on that topic, as well as a few other interesting ones. Rounding out the who category would be our rights restoration cases, as well as our medical marijuana case. Rights restoration cases centering around the issue that we believe that the appropriate test to determine who it is that can be prohibited from owning or possessing firearms are those that have some indicia of dangerousness in their convictions, not folks that have been convicted of nonviolent felonies or other or status crimes like being a user of medical marijuana. Turning to the what category houses all of our hardware cases. Those are going to be our assault weapons ban cases, which I'm sure everybody is keenly aware of, as well as our large capacity magazine cases, as well as critically just within the last few months, our Brown v. ATF case, or Brown 2, we call it because we have another Brown v. ATF case. But our Brown 2 case, which is our challenge to the NFA, as a result of the big beautiful bill passed by the Trump administration, reducing the tax burden on SBRs, SBSs, AOWs, and silencers from $200 to $0. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. In that assault weapons category, that does include Viramontes, which is one of the cases I mentioned that is currently up on petition for cert. That is our challenge to the Cook County, Illinois assault weapons ban. So essentially Chicago's assault weapons ban, which predates the Illinois assault weapons ban. That case is currently up on petition for cert. We think it's an interesting vehicle for the Supreme Court to address the assault weapons ban issue. And then we do have additionally our Harrell case, which is our challenge to the Illinois state assault weapons ban. And that case was just heard on oral arguments this past Monday before the Seventh Circuit. That is an assault weapons and magazine capacity case. We think that's also a very attractive vehicle for the Supreme Court to take up both those issues, particularly because we have a judgment on the merits in that case and a full trial record. So we have kind of all of the indicia that the Supreme Court might look for to have the fullest possible factual record in order to take up that issue. The last category then would be our where category. Where can you exercise your Second Amendment rights? The largest category there that we have litigation in is in our so-called sensitive locations cases. As I'm sure many of you remember, after the Bruin case came down in June of 2022, all of the typical gun control states that are going to now be dragged kicking and screaming into giving all of the good folks in this room their carry permits decided that they needed to come up with another way of preventing you from carrying your firearms in public. And so what they did was create new legislation that created overlapping patchworks of so-called sensitive location categories, inside of which even permitted individuals were not allowed to carry. So we have ongoing challenges in multiple jurisdictions like New York, New Jersey, California, to those cases, and we are slowly chipping away at the various categories of sensitive locations in which even permitted individuals are not able to carry. The second half of our where category has to do with non-resident permits. In many jurisdictions now that have been forcefully shifted from may issue to shall issue, they are still dragging their feet on making permits available to non-residents. That means that if you happen to have to travel outside of your state into one of these states for business or pleasure, that your fundamental rights under the Second Amendment to carry a firearm for your own protection and the protection of your family and others is eviscerated. We filed multiple challenges in jurisdictions to get those non-resident permits available to folks, and we have been overwhelmingly successful in doing that, including probably most notably our CRPA v. LASD case that's in California. Thank you. In which we have received an injunction that allows staff members to get a non-resident California carry permit. So that is something that we're very pleased about. And if you go on California DOJ's website, it says right in black and white that you have to be a staff member to get that permit. So we're thrilled with that. I would be remiss if I didn't take a few minutes to introduce and mention a new key addition to the SAF legal department that I'm sure you guys have heard about a few times from the pulpit so far this weekend, and you're going to hear from him directly in just a few minutes. But we are pleased to have added attorney Kostas Moros to the legal department here at SAF. Kostas comes to us as our Director of Legal Research and Education. He worked previously at Michelle and Associates in California. He was there for 6 years, where he handled Second Amendment litigation, frequently on behalf of Second Amendment Foundation. Kostas is going to be doing 3 primary things in terms of how he educates and does research on behalf of SAF and gets the good message out to folks in a meaningful way. And these are largely his words, not mine, but he will be educating the courts, and this is going to be our widely expanded amicus program. We've taken our amicus brief program in-house by adding Kostas, and so we're going to be dramatically increasing our output of amicus briefs in cases that are important to SAF, but that we are not already a party in. I think already Kostas has filed 4 amicus briefs on our behalf, and we expect many more by the end of the year, so we're thrilled with that addition. The second way that Kostas is going to be spreading the good word is educating the current Department of Justice. One of Kostas's other strengths, in addition to being an internet tastemaker extraordinaire, is that he has a fantastic Rolodex with the Department of Justice and current members of the administration. And we have kind of inside access to the movers and shakers in the administration in a way that we have not before. And we're very excited to be able to have some open lines of communication with the administration and hopefully be able to nudge them in the right direction. We have already seen some pretty significant movement in some ways that I probably shouldn't talk about from the podium, but very valuable, and we're pleased to have Costas here in that capacity. And then lastly is educating the public. Costas, as you guys probably know, is perhaps best known as a tastemaker, influencer extraordinaire. He has a fantastic talent for taking complex legal issues, whether it's filings or legal decisions, and creating threads on X, detailing them and explaining them in layman's terms. It's something that he's going to be doing both in his in an ongoing capacity on his private channel as well as directly on the SAF X channel. So you'll be seeing a lot more in-depth content explaining exactly what it is we're doing and some of the more nitty-gritty legal doctrine that are indicative or inherent to whatever it is, whatever case we're talking about. Costas, of course, as a multiple year litigation associate, will also be helping me in reviewing documents, planning cases, addressing legal questions, legal theory, doing legal research for us all in-house. All in all, he's a tremendous addition, so we are thrilled to have him. Yes. Looking to the future, we try to strike the appropriate balance with our legal department of being proactive and reactive. As I'm sure you all are aware, as new cases or as cases reach some sort of resolution, the next step becomes apparent and necessary. So we, of course, will be watching the Supreme Court very closely to see if they choose to take up an assault weapons ban case, a magazine capacity case, one of our young adult cases, or a sensitive locations case. If they do, the outcome of that case will largely drive what comes next. In addition to that sort of reactive capacity, we also will continue to be proactive in our ongoing red flag initiative, where we have identified 6 particularly egregious red flag statutes around the country that we're going to be challenging on an ongoing basis, as well as closely watching additional new legislative developments in all of the gun control states that we can all name, I'm sure, and to be poised to challenge those as soon as they might hit the governor's desk. I think it's probably appropriate in my last 2 minutes or so just to talk real briefly about some of the key wins that SAF had this past year, because there were multiple, and I'll see if I can jam a couple in here real quick. In Reese v. ATF, the Fifth Circuit ruled in our favor, and ultimately the ATF decided not to appeal to Supreme Court, that the federal prohibition on FFL selling handguns to adults under 21 was unconstitutional. That's a big win. That case has now been remanded back to the district court, where there's an ongoing battle as to the scope of that injunction. But we're hoping that we get that injunction applied to all SAF members nationwide. That would be a huge win. Critically, that case also creates a circuit split with our other Brown v. ATF case, or Brown 1, which is our case currently up on cert, in which another circuit court ruled against us. So we now have 2 circuits in the United States saying opposite things about the same federal statute. Circuit splits like that are ideal red meat for the Supreme Court to step in and fix that, so that federal law is interpreted the same everywhere across the nation. And so we are very hopeful that our Brown v. ATF case gets taken up by the Supreme Court, and we get this federal young adult handgun purchase ban struck down once and for all. And once you become a legal adult, you can go buy the Glock 19 that you want. CRPA VLASD, that was our California non-resident carry permit case that I already mentioned, but that's a fantastic win. We had a very interesting First Amendment win in a case called Junior Sports v. Bonta. That's a case out of California, where one of the strange, novel ways that California decided they want to screw with the firearms industry and all of us was by restricting firearms advertising that, quote, could reasonably appear to be attractive to minors, unquote, whatever that's supposed to mean. So if you made an advertisement that I guess people under 18 thought might be exciting or might lead them to want to shoot guns, which they are absolutely legally able to do, and their right to do so was constitutionally protected, that California thought that that was a no-no. We got that struck down as a violation of the First Amendment, so we were thrilled with that win. And then another great win out of California was Nguyen v. Bonta, and I think this is a great historical one to end on in my last 6 seconds here. because it's the first case that the Ninth Circuit didn't take en banc and overrule. So in that case, we got the 1 gun a month or gun rationing law struck down as unconstitutional. The en banc court didn't take it and trash our win. And so the Ninth Circuit en banc court, batting 1,000 record, I think it was 50-0 of upholding Second Amendment violative cases, is now struck down, and we actually now have a lasting win in the Ninth Circuit. So thank you all for being here. That's what the SAF legal program is doing for you, and hopefully we'll continue doing for you for a long time to come. Thank you.
It's absolutely fabulous to hear about the wins that SAF is having, and I'm enjoying the rebranding that they've been doing here at SAF. And Thursday night when I came in, I saw somebody from the SAF staff that was sitting outside, and she had on this black T-shirt, and it had the Red Hot Chili Peppers logo on the corner of it. And I'm like, oh, she likes the Chili Peppers. That's great. They haven't put out an album in a long time. And then I took a closer look, and it said Second Amendment Foundation on it. I'm like, hey, that's really cool. She's like, uno momento, por favor. She turns around, and on the back is the list of a number of the wins that SAF has had in the year that they did them. And it, of course, it reminded me of the old concert T-shirts that we used to give when we were younger. So I'm going to make sure I pick up one of those and wear it back on the airplane when I head home today. Our next speaker is a one stay-at-home mom that now spends her time serving as Missouri State Director of Women for Gun Rights. During the legislative session, you'll find her hitting offices and working the phones, advocating on behalf of Missouri's female firearm owner in Second Amendment issues and in the Missouri Attorney General. Along with her role at Women for Gun Rights State Director of Missouri, she serves as the chapter leader of Armed Women of America, helping become women more confident and competent concealed carriers. That's like 4 C words in a row, right? Made it through. She's also the current leader at her church's safety team. Let's welcome Susan Myers.
Thank you. Tall people speaking this morning. Okay. Let's see where we're at. For those of us who've gotten pulled into advocating for our Second Amendment, I'm guessing, despite what the anti-gunners claim, it was not dollar signs, fame, or prestige that set most of us heading down this path. Let's be real, there are easier ways to make money and far more popular issues to volunteer your time working hard to advance. No, I'm going to say, for the most part, the truly dedicated Second Amendment advocates are built different. Easy money with minimal effort is not our motivation. The issues at stake are ones we feel so strongly about that we are more than willing to engage in all the uphill battles that are necessary to see things put right, no matter how long it takes. That doesn't mean there won't be times, regardless of how strong the commitment, when we each, as individuals, will reach our first or our 101st brick wall of frustration. For me, it was mid-February 2024 as Missouri's session abruptly ended movement on all Pro-2A legislation following Kansas City's Super Bowl parade shooting. In the midst of it, feeling particularly low and wondering out loud if my advocacy efforts were making any difference at all, a former representative friend, Sonia Anderson, reminded me, "You're keeping the issue alive." Those 5 words, served up in an undramatic, matter-of-fact tone, managed to deliver a 180 mindset reversal the moment they reached my ears. I want to share with you why that is, along with ways to adjust how you look at your advocacy goals and objectives to help reduce the level of frustration, the level you let frustration have on you, or something like that. Here's hoping something shared can help the next time you feel the frustration mounting. Everybody likes to know that their efforts are worthwhile and contributing positively to the cause. You can't put in determined, die-hard effort day after week, after month, after year without wondering what good it's doing. The easiest and most welcome way to gauge if your work has been successful is through achieving the goal. The bill gets signed into law, or you help get it killed. The case wins in court, or you help defeat it. Sweet success. Now on to the next goal. But what do you do when the prospect of achieving the goal is clearly going to be out of reach for a long time? What if there's even a chance that you won't live to see it happen in your lifetime? Frustrating, yes? Frustration shows up when you find yourself unable to change something or to achieve a targeted goal. The harder you've worked to try and make it happen, the more frustrated you can become, especially if you've tied all your visions of success directly to that end goal. Instead, assess the given situation you find yourself working towards. Is the ultimate goal attainable? If so, what's the realistic time frame of that look like? If we're talking several years or possibly even after you're gone, please do yourself a favor right now. Take a moment to visualize yourself cutting the string that ties the concept of your work's value directly to the thing. If through no lack of effort on your part, that goal is out of reach, then it's not being fair to you to be grading yourself by that alone. When you find yourself in a situation that's beyond your control, the one thing you do control is what you do about it. This is where I found myself that day back in 24. I couldn't see my way past the anger and frustration, not until I heard those words Sonia spoke. In the short span it took to hear her say it, I had done the assessment and acknowledged to myself, whether or not I ever see that bill pass, this was still my fight, and the Missouri legislature had not seen or heard the last of me. If you continue on while allowing yourself to remain easily frustrated, your level of performance or effectiveness may start to slip. It's hard to give something your best when you're upset or easily irritated. Frustration is a powerful motivator. A person can give in, allowing it to radicalize them. They can throw their hands up in defeat and walk away, or they can find the fortitude to push ahead with the championing of their ideals in a positive, purposeful, and consistent manner, determined to keep the issue alive on their watch. While in the midst of the work, it is often difficult to gauge whether or not you are making an impact. People may be telling you you're doing a great job, but if you don't see any tangible evidence of the needle moving in your favor, then how can you be sure? I've often thought how nice it would be to have the ability to see behind the curtain, so to speak, to find out just exactly what impact, if any, an individual's advocacy efforts might bring about. So I decided to ask some of the people who happen to be in a position to know what they would suggest are some of the more important or helpful efforts that 2A advocates should engage in. The single word used most often was consistent, followed by reliable, and then presence or showing up. Other suggestions included building relationships with staff and office holders, sharing pertinent information, telling personal stories that put a face to the issue. and then encouraging and or mobilizing others to engage in the process. Story time. Living 2.5 hours away from the Capitol, I like to stay overnight if there's reason to be there 2 days in a row. And this is what I had done for a couple of hearings on a Monday with our gun rights rally the next day. At the rally, a freshman, she was female, but a freshman representative, when speaking to the crowd, announced she had just been told her Pro 2A bill had just been scheduled for hearing the following afternoon. Having already been there 2 full days and with no more outfits packed, I thought, well, shoot, I need to go introduce myself and apologize for being unable to make it to her hearing. So I made my way over to where she would step off stage, introduce myself, and explain to her that I wouldn't be able to make it. I was taken aback when her face did not hide her disappointment as she said, I've been watching all the hearings and thought, well, at least she'll be there to speak in support. Think about that. Someone I'd never met or spoken to was already counting on me being there for her bill. Why would she be led to expect that of me? Perhaps it was because I hadn't missed being there for any of the other firearms-related bills that had already been heard during session. And we're not talking just the hot button issue bills either. Every single bill related to firearms or self-defense, I was there having something to say about it. Before I could even answer her, another representative approached to thank me for always being there, always being here. I laughed and said, oh man, I was just telling her I wasn't going to make it to testify, and then you come up being all nice and bragging on me. So I turned, looked her in the eye, and said, let me talk to my husband. Her response, tell him I was giving you the sad puppy dog eyes. Now, he doesn't like me being on the highways any more than necessary. So he told me he'd prefer I just stay overnight again and he'd keep feeding my hound dog. That evening, the representative posted about the scheduled hearing on her official page, so I commented, I'll be there 100%. Wearing the jeans and Women for Gun Rights t-shirt I had traveled up in with the blazer already worn 2 days straight, I then spent the entire day sitting around the Capitol waiting for the hearing that unfortunately wasn't scheduled until after the House had adjourned for the day. Despite the long day, I was so glad that I was there because so was the woman from Mom's Demand. It was just me and her. I wouldn't have forgiven myself had I been at home watching her testify without being countered. Her testimony bemoaned how bad Missouri's loose gun laws are, how we need stronger gun safety measures, and closed by saying that the state not allowing urban areas to restrict firearms makes our streets more dangerous. My testimony, which came after hers, included a personal story that served as an example of how the topic at the heart of what was being discussed, disarming young adults, could wrongly impact the ability of a young woman to effectively protect themselves, such as in my case, discovering you're being stalked by someone you barely know. I closed with, that younger version of me had just as much right to defend herself as the woman who's sitting here today. Which testimony do you think stuck with them longer? This example of advocacy on the fly contains all but one of the top advocacy efforts previously mentioned. It just goes to show your impact can reach farther than you were even aiming for. A couple more responses I want to share. This one is from Representative Burleson's communications director. Congressman Burleson often talks about how real reform requires shifting the Overton window, moving what seems possible in the public debate so that stronger protections for liberty can actually be enacted. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens because advocates show up, testify, write letters, and encourage others to stay engaged. Lastly, women gun owners are currently in the enviable position of finding our voices cutting through and being heard above the usual debates. Legislators aren't yet used to us showing up to testify in support, let alone hearing us bring impactful personal stories, pertinent information, and thoughtful arguments to back up our stance. As one Missouri senator's chief of staff put it, you bring a woman's voice and perspective to this issue, which I believe is powerful. So, if you find yourself operating in an environment fraught with frustration, concentrate on bringing your best to the efforts within your control and consider your work worthy and well done. You may not be the one who gets to stand beside the governor while he signs the legislation you advocated on behalf of for decades. You may not be the one standing on the steps of SCOTUS holding up the favorable opinion, but you will be the one that those people look back upon and credit as being among the tenacious fighters who, despite the odds, never gave up, never backed down in the face of unsurmountable odds and ruthless opposition. You will be among the few who kept the issue alive, and they will thank you for it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. Our next speaker is, he works as the Chief Government Affairs Officer and Senior Vice President for SIG Sauer. He considers it an honor to work for the company that supports the mission of the nation's warfighters, law enforcement, and our constitutional freedoms. He also serves as the state litigator for the South Carolina House of Representatives, where he has led on the Second Amendment efforts, including the passing of constitutional carry in South Carolina as the primary sponsor in 2024. He also serves on the board of the American Suppressors Association. Let's welcome Bobby Cox. Excuse me, Bobby.
Right. Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I think it's a timely to go after that great speech that just occurred. As I've said, I'm Bobby Cox, not Billy Cox, but it's great to be here with you today. I was supposed to speak last year, I think San Diego, but I was actually flying from New York out there, and then Tropical Storm Helene hit, and I had to fly back home and take care of my family, my mom's cats. They were out of power, and my family, kids and wife down in South Carolina. So it's great to be back here with my Second Amendment family this year to talk about some really important issues. As was mentioned, I'm wear a lot of hats in my world. I'm a husband, father, like I mentioned. I'm still in the Army Reserves. I was in the Army for a while. I'm still in the Reserves. I work at SIG Sauer, which is a great company. I still feel like I'm on active duty working at SIG, and also I'm a state legislator in South Carolina. So a lot going on, and I won't be able to do that without my wife. So she says she was going to be watching. So hopefully she's critiquing me well and giving me some feedback. But today I wanted to talk about really what ties into the last presentation with some of the lessons learned on victory that we got in South Carolina in my home state with passing permitless carry back in 2024. That's really what it's all about while we're here, restoring the freedoms, and many times it's happening on the local level. We get fixated on the federal, which is very important, but a lot of those battles are being fought on the state level and our local jurisdictions, so we can't lose sight of that. And this was a topic I wanted to talk about last year, but I think it's still very timely when it comes to what we're discussing now. And so what we'd like to do is talk about kind of the state of play here what was going on in South Carolina during the time. It's kind of like a case study of how we got to victory and how we got it over the finish line. And then some, like previously discussed, this is some of those lessons learned that we can all take in our day-to-day fights for the Second Amendment, and how I use that in South Carolina and how we can use it on all levels, from the local all the way up to the federal level. So when I entered the legislature in 2019, my goal was to focus on veterans issues, sportsmen's initiatives, and the Second Amendment. Shocker, right? With my background. Those were my top 3 priorities based upon serving in the Army, working at SIG, and just loving the outdoors like many of us do. The state legislature at the time was majority Republican, as you would think it would be in South Carolina. We have 46 senators and 124 state representatives. And then a couple years later, we had a supermajority in both chambers. And we're a state of about 5 million people. But what was really, in the midst of all that, what was just really interesting was that we stagnated when it came to pushing Second Amendment issues. The last victory we had was the reciprocity in Georgia back in 2018. And then before that was establishing an actual concealed weapons permit program within the state. And so I got there, I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, thought I could take on the world, and I really wanted to start getting some major Second Amendment victories since we had not had them in so many years. And I was so perplexed of why we weren't able to do that. It's South Carolina, for goodness sakes. Like, we should be constitutional carry, everything else that we're fighting for in all these other kind of blue states. So I wanted to understand the dynamic of why was that the case. So while permitless carry was always the goal, the legislature and governor at the time were not really educated on gun policies. We didn't have good advocates like the one before that would come and talk to them. And so there was a reluctance to pursue those Second Amendment legislations. They were timid. They didn't want to assume responsibility and risk because they were just not up to speed on the process of what the Second Amendment was all about. So I partnered with several of our organizations here to start what I took would be a 4-year process to get this across the finish line. So we knew we had to show that permitless carry was not a danger or that would turn the state into the wild, wild west, like many naysayers always predicted it would be. And not only was our leadership and governor timid about it, but our state law enforcement was actually against it as well. And so it was hard for legislators to go against the blue because they supported law enforcement. So we had a lot of work to do. And that's a picture of our governor shooting an MCX full auto. That's my hand behind him. So he did pretty good that day. So give him a free advertisement at Palmetto State Armory there too. So we had to get them into this comfort zone of being able to advance Second Amendment. And so what I did is I met with leadership. I conducted ranges, as you saw there, with legislators. And the funny part is I did it for everybody, Republicans, Democrats, and majority of the legislators afterwards that shot came to me were Democrats that wanted guns. But they're like, don't tell anybody though. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So after an education campaign for getting them to trust me as a freshman agent, that I was a credible person, we were able to get a bill introduced that would be open carry with permit. The first step to kind of open their eyes and get them comfortable with this policy. And so what we did is we did away with the fee that would actually go with the license. And so all you had to do was get the training, and then the fee and the license was free. So essentially you just had to get the permit to both carry open and concealed. What was frustrating was before that, and you guys were probably like this, I would get, kind of made fun of all the time being in South Carolina, where people would take road trips from Florida up north, and they would drive around South Carolina because our laws were just so bad when it came to concealed carry and open carry. And I'm like, we have to fix that. But first, we had to get them used to permitless carry first and get comfortable with that. And so this open carry with permit was our way in. We dubbed it the Open Carry with Training Act. And like I said, it did away with the fee. You can open and conceal carry as long as you had that permit. And so it was kind of a genius way of actually getting into the minds and making them comfortable about the policy. I was attacked by, you name it, all the organizations saying I was making society unsafe down there. My neighbors next door, who even knocked on doors for my first campaign, disowned me because they were like, hey, you're going to make this the wild, wild west, And so that's just part of the process when you have to serve like that. So what we did was we got that passed in 2021. And after a couple years, they realized, hey, this doesn't turn into the wild, wild west. And a lot of people don't even know they're an open carry state because they don't see it a lot. And so that was a great start. And so what people realized was this was sound policy. And so majority of the people were like, hey, let's get this going. Crime didn't go up. We're still a safe state. Let's go to the next level. And so it really alleviated a lot of the fears that people had in our state legislature. But we still had a resistance from our state law enforcement as well as our governor. And so what we had to do was we had to come up with this omnibus kind of Second Amendment type bill. And what we did is we dubbed it the South Carolina Constitutional Carry Second Amendment Preservation Act of 2024. Okay. And so what it did was not only would it allow permitless carry for our state and reciprocity with those states, but it also put in a measure in there that was that felon in possession of firearms, the state law enforcement could actually go after those who are legally owning firearms that was law on the federal level, but was not mirrored on the state level. And so this was a way that we actually got support from the governor and the state law enforcement to remain neutral. And so with this strategy, we passed permitless carry in March of 2024, and we became the 29th permitless carry state in the nation, which was amazing. So it's been over a year, and you can't even tell we're a permitless carry state. I tell you that right now. I've seen, I work in the firearms industry. I've seen one person carry in my community, and I think those are rookie numbers. We got to get those up, but you just don't see it. People just think it's going to be everywhere, but a lot of people carry concealed or don't even know. And so we're still not the Wild Wild West, and I'm still waiting on an apology from my neighbors, but I will probably not get that, so. We wave to each other and everything, so we still give them Christmas cards. But as President Trump says, service is its own reward, and that's why you have to do this. And so what I wanted to do is kind of like what she talked about previously, is like some of these lessons learned that I took in this fight can also be applied to all that you're doing out there on the front lines with you fighting for the Second Amendment. So that was a fast history of the last 4 years, but you can't go about this alone. You have to build coalition building. You have to bring in constituents. You have to bring in experts. You have to bring in nonprofits, all those people to have a coalition to educate people. And that's what we did. Before I joined the legislature, folks were splintered in the South Carolina legislature because they were fighting themselves. It was just, they didn't have any credible voice in there. And so we educated the leadership on the policy. We got the credibility, built that coalition, and we got across the finish line. And the next thing, this is very key. The messenger is so important. You have to have the right messenger, someone who can lead and build those coalitions and has credibility. Before I showed up to the legislature, and it's not all on me, like I said, it's a team effort, but this effort was led by folks that really, they just wanted to burn it down. They didn't want to talk to anybody. And at times that's good when it comes to policy, but if it's not advancing anywhere, you have to take a hard look at it. And that's what we did. We essentially got credibility. They used me as a veteran working in the gun industry, and I was able to be that messenger that needed to carry across the finish line, like I said. And there was a reluctance with our governor and state law enforcement. So instead of just pushing through permitless carry, we added on something else to get to yes. We didn't sacrifice the core issue, but we got to a point where we created this omnibus bill, and we were able to get across the finish line. So those are kind of some of the things that I would say, take that out there to your community. Get that coalition going, get the right messengers, and then get to the solution somehow without sacrificing the core issue. This is what we did. So I'm honored and humbled to have led that effort. South Carolina is a permitless carry state. When we passed the law, I had an email from a woman who, she was working every single day. She's a single mom. She could not get to the training to get a permit to carry a gun. And she says, now I can carry a gun. I can protect my 2 kids. I work late. I'm going to a car. She's a server. She's like, because of your efforts and our coalition, I can protect my family and I can protect myself when I'm leaving my work and going to work. And that's what it's all about. And we did that, all of us. And that's still going on. And the fight continues to happen. So I'll continue to pray for you guys when you're out there doing the fight. We have remained diligent. I thank the Second Amendment Foundation for all they do. They've been a trusted partner along the way with me as a legislator, as well as SIG. So if you have any questions about state politics or even Sig Sauer with all that's going on in the world with us right now, please ask. And I tell you, I never knew I had so many friends until I started to work for a gun company for some reason. So everyone, people I haven't talked to in the Army for 10 years, like, hey, do you got a friends and family discount? So we're happy to help. So, enjoy the rest of our weekend. It's an honor to be up here, and thank you for all you do, and God bless.
All right. Well, that was a great speech. It's interesting to see that even in coming from, I live in what I call occupied territory, but to get to free America, as we call it, we still have to play chess to figure out what's one step and what the next step is and how we're going to play this. And it's always interesting like that. What we're going to do right now, folks, is we are going to take our morning break. They are going to put the QR code up to support the NFA fight. Right now, there are 2 lawsuits that they have going on. There's one more that's going to be coming up, and we all know with when this gets defeated, we all know how much we're saving on our NFA items, right? $200. You could donate $200 to SAF to keep these fights going, so we don't have to do it again. So we'll take a quick break. This break is sponsored by the U.S. Law Shield. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.
You want me looking at you or looking at the speech like I'm pretending to give my speech? Give him the Clinton. That's true. Yeah, see, we need these pictures for continuity to prove that this happened. Because I can't see with them and I can't see without them. Good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Let's try to get back to it pretty quickly here. In order to save a little bit of time, the next introduction is going to be super quick. Our next presenter is going to be standing in for Diana Muller, and she is the Lifetime of Achievement Award winner, Cheryl Todd.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for allowing me this honor. I am filling in, as Charlie said, for my amazing friend Diana Muller, who was not able to be here today. Now, Diana is a 22-year law enforcement veteran, a 3-gun champion shooter, and the founder of Women for Gun Rights, okay? She is an undisputed warrior for the Second Amendment. So as I stand here in my camo, I'm feeling the weight of that pressure to fill in those shoes. You know, GRPC is one of the most pivotal events that we see happening in the Second Amendment space, and Diana and I are both honored to have this opportunity to address you today. And I do have to share with you, she is watching from home, and I don't know if she knew I was going to share this part with you, but she sent me some instructions in order to fill in for her. She said, you can't do this in your gun freedom radio voice. All right. She also said, try to get through it without taking a selfie. And she says, drop your voice a little bit and those polka dots, and try not to be so doggone sweet and nice, because you're me today, right? So wish me luck in all of those things. But in all seriousness, Diana, she misses being able to be here, and she sends her love to everyone. So the topic today, I am reading what Diana had hoped to share with you. So these are Diana's words, and the topic today is understanding the threat. We all know that there are forces at work to disarm America. If you are here, if you are listening, it means that you are engaging, and thank you so much for that. And you are part of the battle. And as any good warrior knows, the famous rule from the art of war is know thy enemy. And I just want to take a minute and take a mental pulse of the room. Now, don't be shy to speak what you feel. How many of us think that we're winning? How many of us think maybe we're losing? Okay. That's good. So we have many recent victories, such as constitutional carry expanding to 29 states, almost 30 from what I hear, and the amazing Bruin decision. But I fall more in the we might be losing category. And really, that's based on a 30,000-foot view of this deeply divided nation. And I'll share with you why I think our side really needs to understand, acknowledge, and even respect the enemy. Now, you know the names: Moms Demand Action, Everytown, Giffords, Brady. These anti-gun groups never stop. and they never let a tragedy go to waste. They push in every direction, through the courts, through the legislatures, through corporations, and through the media. They pressure corporations to cut ties with gun companies. They shame politicians, and they run emotional ads. And here's the thing, they've been effective. Maybe not massive, sweeping bans yet, but they have managed to chip away a magazine ban here, a waiting period there, age restrictions, background check expansions. It is death by 1,000 cuts for the Second Amendment. But more importantly, they have changed the hearts and minds of their friends, families, communities, not to mention the many, many young people and the legislators. So how have they been so effective at shaping public opinion? Public opinion. They are intentional. They are strategic. They are extremely motivated, heavily funded, and focused on making guns taboo in the hearts and minds of the average American. And so here are some of the examples of why I'm concerned. First of all, Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, has bragged that due to her efforts, there used to be Democrats who had NRA ratings of A. I mean, that's the best. That's the pinnacle, right? Democrats that had an A, and 0 Republicans who had an F. And now there are 0 Democrats, and we have seated elected Republicans with an F grade from the NRA. We recently heard even from Congressman Brian Mast, a military man, right? A Republican from Florida, say that he thought some gun control might be in order. And a candidate in deep red Oklahoma, when he goes door knocking, he reported that people are nodding along and agreeing with every topic and every subject until he gets to guns. This is Oklahoma. How are young politicians to navigate that? Next, take into consideration Moms Demand Action also has a program called Demand a Seat, where they train their volunteers to run for office. Now listen to this. They have elected over 500 of those volunteers since 2021. That's smart, and it is intentional. I think you're going to see a theme with that word, intentional, right? So this cancer has spread. It has spread to every corner of our nation. We have the East Coast, right? We have the West Coast, which has very, very deeply fallen. And we even have Oklahoma that has absorbed this cancer. So last year, the Congressional Sportsman Foundation released a poll that showed nationwide approval of hunting, and the shooting sports is going down. Now think about that. These are activities that built this nation. These are traditions that have been passed down through the generations, and they're being eroded. Now, that's not because they've lost value, but because the other side is working harder than we are. Now, let's take another look at something that is so impactful. Democrats have, it's reported, have lost over 2 million voters. So at the same time, the Republicans have gained about that same number. So that seems amazing, right? But do you think that those millions of voters have just magically changed their minds about guns? I doubt it. That's a big risk for us to take. They probably just don't want to be communists. So in effect, there's a real danger that conservative values are being worn down and watered down. Take the 4 years of the Biden administration, where they implemented the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So basically, they pumped $1.2 billion with a B of taxpayer money into states to basically blackmail them to write and enact gun control bills. So now we have Trump back in office. So Diana has been scratching and clawing, trying to get this administration to keep the office and keep the money, but change the name to the Office of Firearms Education and Violence Prevention and put those monies back into the states to undo what has been done. But alas, many people from our side just want it gone. And in fairness, it is an unconstitutional body, but it feels like we are making a huge mistake not to capitalize on the yardage that the enemy made during those 4 years. And meanwhile, many people on our side, what do we say? We say, you know what? That'll never happen. They're never going to take our hunting rifles, right? Or we say, you know, we're safe because we've got the Constitution on our side. Now, that's half right. We do have the Constitution on our side, but are we ever safe? We are not ever safe. Or here's my personal least favorite. I'm a gun owner, but, right? Well, here we are. Not only, as I said, has most of the Northeast been lost and the entire West Coast has fallen, and the cancer is spreading. Look at Colorado, Texas. Every major city are enacting laws and regulations that make them less safe. The other side has simply worked harder than we have, and they have been, what's the word? Intentional. There are also bigger forces at work here. I'm sure we've all heard of ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance scoring. It is being used as a financial and cultural tool to silence, restrict, and ultimately disarm Americans. Corporate or boardroom activists is something that Diana has witnessed firsthand. She and Chris Chang, back in 2019, were invited into the belly of the beast. They went to the New York Times Deal Book Summit. They participated in a breakout session at a conference with executives from Citibank, right? There's no shock. Royal Caribbean and Levi's, and other gun control advocates on the topic of guns. Now, these were not lawmakers, and in fact, that was the discussion. How to usurp the legislative process and still push gun control. They know they can't win now, right now, through the legislative process, so they were scheming at very high levels of corporate leadership and mainstream media sources to enact their will on the American people. They flat out said they are willing to lose money in order to take the social justice and their perceived moral high ground. They mentioned doing to guns what they have effectively done with tobacco, to vilify tobacco. So that's the reality of today's battlefield. It's not just political, it's cultural, financial, and even spiritual. Politics, as we know, are downstream from culture. So, what can we do? I say, let's do what they do. Let's look also at what we have as assets. We do have the truth. We do have the Constitution, and we have the majority. We just have to be more intentional. And here are a couple of suggestions that I want to make. And I am speaking directly to everyone who can hear my voice here in this room, everyone online, to the millions of citizen journalists who have smartphones, who have social media presence, and everyone who comprises we the people. You are who I'm speaking to. Prepare to witness. I liken our advocacy to witnessing for our faith. Think about it. If we don't spend time in church and read the Bible, if we don't study our faith, how are we ever expected to effectively share the gospel with the world? The same principle applies here. If we don't study, if we don't practice, if we don't prepare, if we aren't, what's the word? Intentional about initiating tough conversations, how can we expect to effectively counter the lies and the misinformation that have run rampant for decades? Here's another idea. Fight fire with fire. Use emotions like the other side does. Lead with your story, not the Constitution. Nobody can argue with your lived experience. And the gun control lobby does not own tragedy. There is a plethora of stories of people who have survived tragedy and still support the Second Amendment. Know their names, share their stories. I encourage you to get out of your comfort zone and be intentional about initiating conversations with people who may not agree with you. Seek out left-leaning or gun control pages on social media. See what they're saying. Leave thoughtful and respectful comments. Ask questions. Plant seeds. One she follows is Moshe on Instagram. Mosheh. Number 3, let's up our optics game. One thing that the enemy does really well is optics. They create the visual that shows strength in numbers. You know, our side, we like to always put our best foot forward. We always want to appear professional, especially if we're visiting our capital or Capitol Hill in DC. But shaping public opinion doesn't work like that. So that is really what led to our Teal for 2A t-shirt campaign. So it's an issue over ego because at the end of the day, it's not about how fancy we look. It is about how relatable we are, how much people can look at us and see themselves. And these t-shirts create silent conversations and send silent messages to everyone who sees us. The conversations that strike up in elevators when we're on Capitol Hill due to wearing these t-shirts are amazing, and we're starting to journal those and take stock of those. So when people can see all of us as real and approachable, that is when the message lands. My last suggestion is this: run for office. Women for Gun Rights, we are so proud to boast that we have at least 3 members that have been elected to serve. Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress, Rebecca Schmoy, somewhere with us here. Thank you so much. Kansas State House, and Kathy Love in the Montana State House. We have to be intentional about taking back the reins, and that starts at the local level. And hats off also to Ava Flanell, who just won the Colorado House seat. I invited her to come up on stage and take a group photo with all of our Teal ladies, but she is already on her way home, unfortunately. And Brandon Herrera, who is running again in Texas. So let me bring all this together. Did we want to clap for Brandon Herrera running in Texas? Yes. Go, 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 Brandon. Okay, so let me wrap this all together. So the forces at work to strip Americans of their sacred right to self-protection are a well-funded, well-organized machine that is shaping culture, politics, finance, and opinion every single day. And the only thing standing in their way is us, right? You and me. And all we need to do is do what they do and be intentional. We at Women for Gun Rights know this fight isn't just about laws and headlines. It is about people. It is about using education over legislation to keep us safe and to keep our rights intact. It's about the mothers, daughters, grandmothers, and families whose safety and freedom depend on a strong Second Amendment. And Women for Gun Rights is uniquely positioned to speak to the women and men who, for whatever reasons, will not hear from or listen to the legacy organizations. The forces working to disarm America are coordinated and relentless, but so are we. And unlike them, we stand on truth, on principle, and on the God-given right that predates government itself. We will not shrink back. We will not apologize. And together, with courage, preparation, and intentionality, we will shape culture, influence policy, and preserve liberty for the next generation. Thank you so much to the Second Amendment Foundation for helping elevate our work and our voices. From this stage, among the legends of the Second Amendment movement, we make this commitment and extend this invitation to join us. We will be bold, we will be relentless, and we will win this fight, not just for ourselves, but for every American who deserves the right to self-defense and to live in freedom. Thank you.
All right. Before we bring up our next speaker, I would like to take a moment to recognize that our hosts here in Salt Lake City, who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, are mourning the loss of their former president, Russell Nelson. Many of us come from different faith backgrounds, and we all appreciate the work and support that our fellow laborers, to our friends in the church, we mourn with you, and we'll remember you in our prayers. And I've had several people come up to me this morning, and there's actually a shooting and a fire at an LDS church in Michigan. Yes, exactly. So the fight will never end, obviously. Our next speaker is an accomplished attorney who has recently begun work as the Second Amendment Foundation's Director of Legal Education. Let's welcome Kostas Moros.
Hey everyone, it's so great to be back at the Gun Rights Policy Conference. Last year I attended for the first time as a guest, but today I'm here as a new addition to the Second Amendment Foundation team, having started my new role, as Charlie just said, as the Director of Legal Research and Education. And I want to thank Adam, Alan, Bill, and everyone else on the staff team for giving me this opportunity. I'll do my best every day to advance the Foundation's critical work. So before coming to SAF, I was involved in a number of Second Amendment lawsuits, including recent ones like CRPA versus LASD, May v. Bonta, did a little bit of work on Duncan v. Bonta, fingers crossed for cert on that one. And there's lots of others I am forgetting, I'm sure. But those of you who know me are aware that I'm not really best known for my work in litigation. There are far better lawyers than me doing that work, and many of them are here today or have been at the conference. Where I have found a sort of niche is in my social media presence. And to be clear, being a loudmouth about gun rights on Twitter is probably not the best career choice for a lawyer, particularly a lawyer in California. I'm not likely to be joining any white shoe law firms in my career anytime soon. I think that ship sailed a few thousand tweets ago. But the reason I started doing it was because I had grown tired of the typical discourse you find online when it comes to the Second Amendment. You've all heard it. Shall not be infringed. From my cold dead hands. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. If guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns, and so on. It's not that these aren't true. They are true. There's kernels of truth behind all of them. But they're just slogans, and we can do better than slogans when we argue for what we believe in. Let me pose the question a different way. What is it that protects the right to keep and bear arms in America? Is it the Second Amendment? Those are certainly some powerful words. a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That makes us different, right? That is why we have the right to bear arms today. No, it's just words on an old piece of paper. The English Bill of Rights was one of the predecessors of our rights to bear arms, but the UK today does not have any meaningful right to keep and bear arms. Mexico's 1857 Constitution also had a right to bear arms, and today that country has all of one legal gun store where it's very difficult for regular citizens to get guns. So maybe the Supreme Court is what protects the right to keep and bear arms. Heller was wonderful, McDonald applied it to the states, and Bruin confirmed our right to carry. Unfortunately, that's about 3 cases in 14 years, with a 12-year gap between McDonald and Bruin. And since then, aside from when the government has asked for it, the Roberts Court has denied cert on all gun-related cases. Now, we here at SAF hope that changes very soon, and we're making every effort to make that happen. But it is clearly not the Supreme Court that is primarily protecting our rights. So what is it then? The answer is public opinion. Public opinion is why the Second Amendment is empowered. Public opinion is the key to everything. It's what wins elections. It's what pushes back on the most extreme infringements. It's why Kamala Harris, who supported a handgun ban when she was in San Francisco, all of a sudden pretended to be a proud Glock owner a year ago during the campaign. She knew that public opinion was now with us, at least as it comes to handgun ownership, so she pretended to be a champion of that aspect of the Second Amendment. The importance of public opinion is why when Americans who may be on the fence see something horrific on the news, such as some evil lunatic going and gunning down children in a school, it's fundamentally not enough to say shall not be infringed or from my cold dead hands. If we lose the battle of public opinion for a sustained amount of time, then we lose elections. And if we lose enough elections, then we lose the Supreme Court. And if we lose the Supreme Court, Heller's overturned, and the Second Amendment is as dead as the right to keep and bear arms that's in the English Bill of Rights. Don't get me wrong. In court, obviously, we should always argue the historical tradition of the Second Amendment as Bruin requires. But in discussions with family and friends, as well as discussions online, we have to be better at convincing people that gun rights are a good policy choice, not just a constitutional right. Because when you fall back on only the Second Amendment without more, all that tells a skeptical person is that we should repeal the Second Amendment. This is why on my Twitter page, while you'll see plenty of posts about legal analysis frequently, looking at recent rulings and all that, you also see a lot about how gun rights are an important policy issue. Half of the articles on my page are not really about the Second Amendment or law at all. They're actually about public policy. I obviously can't teach you in a short speech how to win every gun debate online, nor should you try. Leave that to me. And there are plenty of resources around there to help you just gather facts and data and all that, including some of my articles and plenty of other sources. What I can do is give you a few general principles I have learned as I argue about these issues day after day, year after year. So rule number one, principle number one, I should say, only engage with those who argue in good faith. So there's generally 2 types of anti-gun people. The first and more rare kind are the hardcore authoritarian-leaning people who despise the right to bear arms. You're not going to win against these people because they are not arguing in good faith. The discussion is generally pointless unless your goal is to convince others who may be observing that discussion. Otherwise, just politely go on with your day. There's nothing to be gained. But there's another kind too. People who don't know much about gun laws or policy, but have just been frightened by news coverage of terrible crimes like the horrible shooting that's ongoing right now in Michigan, and our prayers are with the victims there. These people are sometimes more open to changing or at least shifting their opinion if someone came along and didn't just shout slogans out at them. Sorry, this is why you memorize speeches instead of just going off your notes. Just about the Second Amendment. These are the people worth having a discussion with. So principle number 2, and I think I've hinted about this one enough already, do not argue in slogans. Unless it is somehow directly relevant to a point you are making and you're going to expand beyond the slogan, there's no reason to use any of the famous one-liners in the discussion. They will only make you look like a blowhard and will not convince anyone of anything. Save that for bumper stickers. Number 3, steel man the other side's argument. So what I mean by this one is don't try to win with technicalities. A common example that I've seen all the time is someone says, somebody arguing against calls a magazine a clip, right? And the response usually is, well, it's a magazine, not a clip. And you clearly shouldn't be arguing about something you don't know anything about. Condescension has never once in history convinced anyone of anything. It feels cathartic for you in the moment. You feel smarter, but it makes the other person dig in and just think you are a jerk. So instead, argue against what you know they meant to say. Steelman and use the strongest version of the argument and then rebut it. That doesn't mean you can't gently correct them. Like in that example of the clip in magazine, when you respond, you can call it a magazine. But don't try to score a point in the debate because they used the wrong lingo. It doesn't get us anywhere. Number 4, don't attempt to win by trickery. This one annoys me maybe more than all of the others. Never attempt to win a debate by trying to trick the other side. Even if you temporarily make someone think they are wrong, it does not last. An example I have seriously seen some people use in the arguments about AR-15s and assault weapons is people say, well, you know, AR-15 shouldn't be banned because 223 is basically the same as 22. It's the same diameter. Of course, anyone who knows anything about guns knows that is incredibly misleading. The diameter is all they have in common. Maybe the person you are having a discussion with doesn't know it at that moment, but if they Google it afterwards, they will never trust your intellectual integrity again. As another example, and one that may get me in trouble with some of the people in this room or watching online, don't attempt to trick people into thinking that semi-automatic rifles are not combat weapons. These are indeed weapons of war, and that's why they should be protected, not banned. Yes, I understand perfectly that rifles like the AR-15 are used very much for self-defense, sports shooting, hunting, all those lawful legal purposes. But it just feels like trickery to me to call them modern sporting rifles. It sounds like a euphemism, as if we're ashamed of what these rifles are capable of. And that's especially bad because an armed population that is capable of combat when needed is at the very root of what the Second Amendment is all about. Instead, when someone says such guns are weapons of war, say, yes, they are. And that's why it's important that law-abiding people have the right to have them because of that. You could point to recent examples like the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, in which armed citizens had to quickly respond and they desperately tried to arm everyone, or the terrible attacks of October 7th in Israel, when again, some lives were saved that day because of armed individuals. That's how you demonstrate why having an armed populace with such weapons is useful against foreign invasions, domestic tyranny, and so forth. America is currently the most powerful country in the world right now, so foreign invasion may feel like a fantasy and plausible. But we don't know what the future holds, and we don't have the right to give up the right to bear arms and thereby doom future generations. It's our responsibility to preserve it. Just because we have it good, others may not. Number 5, and this one's important, especially in light of recent events. Acknowledge the horrors of mass shootings and offer policy ideas for how to deal with them. It is very apparent that mass shootings are currently the fuel of the gun control movement. You see it in their social media. They're frantically posting whenever one happens, sometimes before we even know what exactly the details are. Mass shootings are a tiny fraction of homicides, but play an outsized role in what regular people are worried about when it comes to guns. For the most part, you can avoid gang violence by not being involved in gangs. You can generally avoid drug-related violence by not being involved in drugs. But you can't avoid some nut walking into a movie theater, a school, or a grocery store, or a church. If we don't offer solutions like this, then they will continue to be offered for us. We should try to help reduce the frequency of mass shootings and mitigate the harm they cause, not only because it's obviously the right thing to do, but also to neutralize what is currently the biggest threat to the Second Amendment. The natural desire when mass shootings come up in a debate is to jump right to statistics about how rare mass shootings are. And those stats certainly have a place in the discussion, absolutely. But you have to offer more than just dismissing fears as irrational because of statistics. I have a daughter who's a toddler right now. When she goes off to school in a couple of years, of course I will be afraid of something like Sandy Hook or Uvalde happening. It doesn't matter that it's statistically irrational. I'm human, and on some level, the one thing that anti-gunners are correct about is that even one child being in a place where they should be safe and getting killed there is unacceptable. But the rub is their policy solutions, of course, which are always some form of gun control and nothing else, never school security like my friend Ryan Petty talked about yesterday. Their ideas don't work, and we have to be able to point that out. So we can offer our own solutions too, for schools in particular, that can come in the form of actual armed security in the country, the same way we protect politicians, judges, banks, and sports arenas with armed security. I don't see why our children are somehow worth less than a bank or a politician or any of these other number of places that have armed guards. There's many ideas we can pursue, of course, on how to reduce this terrible contagion. But my greater point here is that in debates, we should always acknowledge that recent years have seen too many of these events, even if they remain statistically rare overall. Don't dismiss this concern, but rather propose ideas for reducing the problem that still manage to respect our right to keep and bear arms. Number 6, the last one, don't forget to not only rebut arguments, but also explain why gun rights are a net positive for society. So too often, people's only experience with guns is hearing about them on the news in connection to some crime, whether that's a mass shooting or some crazy person mugging somebody or whatever else it might be. What they don't hear about, because it gets far less coverage, is defensive gun use statistics. Even the surveys with the lowest results show that such defensive gun use happens hundreds of thousands of times a year, and you should point that out. You could also point out the well-established statistics related to how people with CCW permits almost never commit crime. Numerous states publish data to this effect, showing that there's nothing to fear from people who legally carry. And I've cited that data actually in our litigation to some success. It's not enough to tell people why their arguments are flawed, because that doesn't suddenly make them think gun rights are a good idea. You must also explain to them the social utility of having guns and why they should not only be thinking about them in the worst possible light based on the horrors covered in the news. Now, I could, of course, stand up here and talk all day about the policy points you could make, but I hope that this has made some sense as a starting point. Winning hearts and minds is how we ensure the right to keep and bear arms is around for another 250 years. Effective policy advocacy is the most powerful thing you can do to protect the Second Amendment. Also, donate to the Second Amendment Foundation. Let's not forget about that, too. Thanks, everyone.
All right, our next speaker is the senior advisor to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and he is the state's Doge. He's Florida's Doge team leader. He was previously nominated by President Trump to and confirmed as the Senate as the 7th Inspector General to the U.S. Department of Transportation. He remains steadfast in his personal commitment to securing our constitutional inheritance of freedom, life, and liberty. Let's welcome Eric Soskin.
Good morning. You may know me best from playing the bad guy in cases such as Hollis versus Holder, Gun Owners of America versus ATF, and yes, Clark Opposition versus Barr. If we've got Clark, there he is waving in the back to me. Yeah, I got a nice remembrance photo yesterday. This is really my public debut as a Second Amendment and firearms rights supporter. Let me say thank you to the team here at SAF and Alan and Adam for their leadership in this great event and having me on. And a very special thank you to President Trump and to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for giving me the chance now to spend nearly 5 years working for the cause of freedom. Yes, I was the Department of Justice's go-to lawyer to defend lawsuits brought by SAF and NRA and FPC and many others against the U.S. government. Only once in a while did I get to be the good guy, like defending PLACA against all the frivolous lawsuits brought by those Brady guys. But then, late in his first term, President Trump tapped me to lead a small federal law enforcement agency as the IG at DOT, and I thought that meant I'd get to serve in that role under President Trump in his second term. Unfortunately, it led to serving for 4 years in the Biden administration. Most recently, though, I've been back to a leader I can be proud of while heading up Florida's Doge. One of the reasons that working for Governor DeSantis is great is because he is, as Shooting News Weekly headlined recently, the model for how a pro-gun governor should operate. He's brought Floridians permitless carry, appointed rights-minded judges, repealed the state of emergency laws that are just wrong, And currently, we're presiding over a 4-month Second Amendment sales tax holiday. We hope that reverses some of those trends about firearm spending you heard about yesterday. Just as important are the pro-gun supporters he's picked to fill out our executive branch. AG James Uthmeyer is, like me, a veteran of Trump 45. He's responsible for reversing the state's legal position and to side with the Second Amendment on the 18, 19, 20-year-old firearms ban, and to side with open carry on the state's open carry ban. And, well, we'll see what he does with the new suit against the 3-day waiting period. Our new state CFO, Blaise Ngolia, with whom I work closely at Doge, is also dedicated to the right to bear arms. He led the legislature's fight against those post-Parkland restrictions. And our new Lieutenant Governor, Jay Collins, is another strong pro-gun voice, a lead sponsor of the permitless carry bill, who routinely contrasts our freedoms with the places he visited as a Green Beret. You haven't seen the governor's equal enthusiasm in private for firearms freedoms and his understanding of its importance to our Constitution, but I have, even in the last 2 weeks since the assassination here in Utah, with security concerns brought to the fore in our office. Governor DeSantis has been steadfast in stating that our rights must come first. But I want to transition to the main subject of my remarks here today by talking about something else Governor DeSantis has done that is really important, and that is making Florida a leader in eliminating the woke liberal propaganda from our education system. My sons are in middle school in Florida. They are learning the text, structure, and purpose of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. They are getting the Mayflower Compact and not the 1619 Project. They are getting Thomas Paine's common sense, not common left-wing idiocy. I'd like to talk about changing the culture in another set of our institutions, and that's federal law enforcement. My clients when I was at the Department of Justice and my charges at the Department of Transportation. And let me start with a story about the oath to the Constitution that Jim Giudice recited yesterday. Required by Article 5 of the Constitution for all federal and state employees. The text was enacted in the very first law under the very first Congress, and it's been handed down to us today largely unchanged. As a brand new lawyer, I showed up for my first day at the Department of Justice for orientation, and when it came time to do the oath of office, you know what they did? They had a woman from HR take us out into the hall, down the hall to what was basically a little storage closet there on the hallway, and in that closet is where they kept the American flag, right next to a bucket with a mop and shelves of cleaning supplies. And that's where we did our oath of office, standing around an open supply closet door in the hallway. Basically, we had the oath of office in a broom closet. So I used to tell this story expecting to get a few laughs. And you know who was the most horrified of people I talked to? It was the agents at FBI, at ATF, at DEA. And I found that to be really ironic because they were often asking for legal advice on how to get around our constitutional protections. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about why that is. It's because if you're in federal law enforcement, you learn to approach the Constitution with what I call a compliance mindset. And this is true even if you are a law enforcement officer who in your spare time is reloading your own ammo, 3D printing your uppers and lowers, and who would never vote for a supporter of gun control. After my 20 years in the federal government, I can explain why. And it's that the only place that you ever get to think about the Constitution is in training about judge-made rules in the 4th and 5th Amendment and how to avoid being sued under Bivens. And so when you see your mission as being stop, get, and convict the bad guys and go, 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 go until a court stops you, you're in a compliance mindset. It means you look for a court opinion that says you can't do that. And if there isn't an opinion on point, then you are good to go. To help safeguard our rights, we need to change this mindset. The Declaration of Independence tells us why. Carrie Ann showed us yesterday up here on the screen the first words of the preamble to the Declaration, right up to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But consider the next 20 words. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. A concise why and how of American government. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. These words should be on every federal employee's wall, just like there is a pocket constitution on my desk. But it's especially true for those in law enforcement. Their mission needs to be not only to prevent crimes and convict criminals, but to uphold for all Americans the Constitution and our God-given rights. We must go from a compliance mindset to a mission mindset for the Constitution. And it ought to be obvious why. For one thing, it's corrosive to have law enforcement seeing the Constitution as a compliance problem, chafing at its restraints and feeling good when they find a loophole. Make no mistake, America has real enemies abroad and at home, and there are bad guys out there. But without understanding the Constitution as part of the mission, a tunnel vision focus on those bad guys is inevitable. Second, it's that a compliance mindset is what makes it possible to weaponize law enforcement against all of us and our rights. If the only objection you can raise is, has a court said no, that leaves a lot of room for mischief and little room to object to persecuting Tate Adamiak or criticizing politicized investigations. We won't always have as president a leader who has been a victim of this weaponization the way President Trump is and is intent on stopping it. Third, we can unlock numerous sympathetic voices in law enforcement who will speak in favor of the American people and our rights and speak out against abuses. There are a lot of good apples who will do this if only we make it part of their mission. So what do? How do we build a mission mindset in federal law enforcement? This group, the Second Amendment community, can help make it happen. The first thing is education. It starts with the oath of office and the preamble, which I already talked about. The oath is not just to support and defend the Constitution, it is to bear true faith and allegiance to it. And to secure these rights, we need our federal agents not just to know a set of rules, but to understand the history and the meaning and the text. Second, and this is closely related, we must alter the presumption of judicial supremacy that infuses the executive branch. The idea that courts are the only ones whose opinions matter, who decide what the Constitution means. This attitude contributes immensely to the compliance mindset. And President Trump is helping us move past those days, past when George W. Bush could sign a law and say, oh, well, I think this law I'm signing violates the First Amendment, but it's up to the courts to decide. No. Our interactions with the Constitution can't solely be mediated through women and men in black robes. For example, federal agents must understand that when they are making a probable cause determination, they are not just mechanically applying a set of rules courts have set out in the past. They are exercising their own judgment. This is what it means to bear true faith to the Constitution, to our rights, to our values. It means the people trust you, not just lawyers, to interpret the Constitution. We also need to realign law enforcement activities in two ways. We should stop having law enforcement agencies in the business of writing regulations. Otherwise, the tribal nature of human beings, which is powerful in law enforcement, will lead our agents to embrace and zealously enforce those regulations, whatever they are, as we saw during the last 4 years. And it's absolutely terrific to see Harmeet Dillon out there pursuing cities and states for restricting Second Amendment rights, but it would be even better to include our law enforcement agencies in the ownership of those investigations permanently. Even a small unit inside each agency tasked with helping defend the exercise of constitutional rights will make a big impression across the board in those agencies in how the mission is perceived. including by people not in such a unit. We need to turn tribalism to our advantage, not that of the gun grabbers. And there are other things. We need to make sure that our performance standards are aligned so that constitutionally minded leaders and agents rise up. It wouldn't hurt to relocate agency headquarters out of Washington, D.C. either. So in my time as Department of Transportation IG, I started with the first step, education. It took a while because as a Trump appointee in the Biden administration, I had a huge target on my back. But when I tried to find existing law enforcement training that went beyond compliance to reach the purpose, meaning, and history of our rights, there wasn't much out there. So we had to build it for ourselves in-house. And we started with a program about the nature and meaning of the right to keep and bear arms, as well as the First Amendment's free exercise clause and the prescription against general warrants. We put it in the context of history. We told stories. For freedom of religion, it was Peter Stuyvesant, John Bone, and the Quakers of Queens, New York. For the Second Amendment, the story I told was the powder alarm of September 1774, what we know as the dress rehearsal for April 19th, 1775. And for the warrant clause, John Wilkes, not John Wilkes Booth, North Breton number 45, and the Liberty Tree movement that it inspired to emerge in America. And built around those stories was this message: the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and a government of enumerated powers and the Electoral College and federalism, all of these reflect decades, centuries of hard-won experience in the Anglo-American tradition about the natural rights of men and how best to protect those rights. And we tied it to the impacts those rights have had on making America the world leader it is today. I also met every new agent on their first day, administered the oath of office myself, explained its history and its relationship with the purpose of our government. And to build the culture further, I transformed our regular weekly communications with agency staff into a platform for more stories about American greatness, freedom, and the Constitution. And this was all very well received. The plan, which I didn't have time to carry out, was to pair it with small group sessions on let's put this into practice. Let's put agents in situations where they need to judge whether facts about a person's firearms ownership or their political advocacy can form the predicate for an investigation or the probable cause for a search warrant. All of this is all about making our federal law enforcement officers understand how their mission is the Constitution. Look, to wrap up here, the totalitarian left understands the importance of making institutional culture match their values. Consider what they did with DEI, discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, as Governor DeSantis summarizes it. They built an entire industry to train people in something that is absolutely the antithesis of American values, of constitutional values, of our God-given rights. We can undo some of the damage that they've done by building this mindset that the Constitution is the mission. And the Second Amendment community can take the lead in promoting this idea and making it easier for like-minded federal leaders to implement. Not every federal executive is going to be a former constitutional lawyer who can build his own training. But two things that we do very well as a community are training and knowing the Constitution and its history. I hope you'll share this idea, share ideas with me, help me workshop this, and ultimately promote the idea that we can build a mission mindset among federal law enforcement, and we can help law enforcement be a safeguard to our rights, not just a threat. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. Our next speaker is an attorney and former prosecutor and expert witness who has devoted his career entirely to firearms and self-defense law. In 2006, he co-founded Legal Heat and led its growth to from a single location to more than 240 monthly training sites across 46 states. Today, he serves as the Senior Vice President at U.S. Law Shield, which has supported over 2 million members in their self-defense journey. Let's welcome Philip Nelson.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate you allowing me to be here. I want to thank, Adam and Alan and Lauren and the Second Amendment Foundation crew. I do a lot of these conferences, go to a lot of these conferences, and there are very few I've ever seen that have the lineup of speakers and the group that's here today. Being in this industry for about 20 years now, you realize that it's a big industry. The firearm industry is large and it's small at the same time. There are a small cohesive group of people and organizations that help keep this industry running. And so I'm privileged to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. Now I'm going to talk to you today about an interesting subject, and it's lessons learned from self-defense trials. And Charlie mentioned I worked as a prosecutor for a while. I've been a defense attorney for a lot longer than that. And I also work as an expert witness in use of force cases. So I've had the kind of unique perspective of sitting at 3 different places in the courtroom during these trials. But more than that, I'm kind of here representing a group of attorneys at U.S. Law Shield, 400 of them, that litigate these cases daily. So U.S. Law Shield is an organization that provides self-defense insurance. When you're involved in a use of force case, you'll pick up your cell phone, you'll call a 1-800 number, and the attorney in your state answers that phone directly. And we get, just to give you an idea, we get about 10 to 12 of those emergency calls a day across the country, which will eventually end up being life-altering circumstances for our clients. So I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've personally learned, but also that our attorney network has learned. And so I mentioned, by the way, I'm a Utah attorney. I want to welcome you to Utah. Utah is a fantastic state. I hear some people on the breaks grumbling about where you live. Come on out. Utah's great. It's a great place for the Second Amendment industry. It's a great place for the Second Amendment rights. So we'd love to have you. Okay, so let's talk about some lessons learned from self-defense trials. And time's pretty limited. I'm going to try and get 3 primary lessons across that we've learned in doing these hundreds and hundreds of trials. And the first thing that I want to get across is that most self-defense cases, so most trials, end in a guilty plea by the defendant. And I don't know why the actual icons aren't showing up there, so I apologize. But 73% of times when you go to trial are going to result in a guilty plea by a defendant. And I shouldn't say go to trial. The cases resolve in a guilty plea before trial. Now, why? Why would somebody plead guilty without taking their their case to trial? Why would they do that? Well, the reason they do that is a few reasons. First of all, the jury trial outcomes. What percentage of cases end up being a guilty verdict? And I bet this will surprise you. Amongst felony cases, you have 66 or 68, I'm sorry, my eyes are bad, 68% of cases end up in a guilty verdict. And amongst misdemeanors, 77. If you work your way down, acquittals, you only get 27% on the felony cases and only 19 on the misdemeanors. And then 4% dismissal or 3%, and then other 1%, which will be a mistrial or something like that. And so what the lesson we learn from this is, at trial, the odds are stacked against a defendant. So the first reason that people don't take their case to trial is because statistically, the odds are stacked against them, and that's not a good thing. So the first lesson that I want to convey is that by the time you get to trial, you've lost several significant battles. Getting to trial is a loss. You shouldn't be going to trial in a self-defense case. If you end up at trial, you've already lost several times along the way, and I'm going to illustrate why. The second thing, the reason that people don't go to trial, is the cost. The average cost of a self-defense murder trial, so we're talking first degree, second degree, or manslaughter case. The cost of that is staggering. Now, we have our own costs internally, but I kind of wanted to use an outside source so that you can rely on this. This is a University of Nevada study that they evaluated the cost of these cases. And just to give you an idea on the time that is spent on each of these. So, and again, my bad eyes are going to do me a disservice here. But before you get to trial, the pre-trial phase, you are thousands of hours of legal work into a case before you get in front of a judge and jury. And that involves, obviously, the expert witness preparation, the crime scene investigation, the attorney, and you'll usually have at least two attorneys involved in this. So you'll have a first chair and a second chair attorney. They're all preparing their briefs, their discovery motions, and a lot of the battle that goes into a trial happens before it actually goes to trial. Then the actual trial phase, still significant, hundreds of hours. And then if you get convicted, the post-conviction phase, you have another couple hundred hours. And the total for all of those ends up being over 2,000 hours for a capital case, which is a first-degree murder case, or nearly 2,000 hours for a non-capital case. Now, what does that mean in terms of money? Well, Clio, which is a legal research organization, Clio says the average criminal defense attorney charges $211 an hour. So if you hired the average, now, does anybody want an average attorney defending yourself? No, of course not, right? So the average, we're talking kind of run of the mill, you just pick up you Google criminal defense attorney in your town, you call. And so what that ends up meaning is it's $480,000 approximately for a capital case for an average attorney, or $230,000 for a non-capital case. Now, the average median family savings in America. You have a guess of what the average family in America has in their savings account? It's $8,000. All right, so what does this teach us? Well, the first lesson is, again, if you get to trial, you've already lost significantly because the average American cannot afford to pay $200,000 to $480,000 for a quality legal defense team. And that, again, that's average. We just finished a case in Denver where our attorney, we call them independent program attorneys or IPAs, our attorney billed $770,000 for that case and won. But I mean, you got to understand what goes into those cases. We fly in actors that are the same size, weight, height as the defendant in the case. We recreate it all through CGI. Because we need to show a jury what it looked like on that day and place them in the position of our defendant. And that is a very difficult thing to do. So the first lesson we learn is that the average American cannot afford a quality legal defense. The second thing is, the second lesson I want to teach is that self-defense cases are won often in the legislature. And so the reason this is important is we've got a lot of people that have spoken here over the last couple of days that are involved in legislative efforts. And there is a lot that can be done in the legislature to win a self-defense case at trial. And I want to illustrate three examples of that. The first is what's called a stand your, or a presumption of reasonableness or stand your ground statute. So first, talking about stand your ground. So stand your ground laws, by the way, shout out to Utah, were invented in the state of Utah. Now, when you think of stand your ground, you probably think of two states. What states do you think of? Florida, right? We have the George Zimmerman case, which, by the way, stand your ground was not used in that case. That was not a legal defense in that case, but it got a lot of publicity. And you might think of Texas, right? But Utah actually invented stand your ground laws. And back in 1994, we passed a statute. And the way that statute reads is a person does not have a duty to retreat from the force or the threatened force in a place where the person has lawfully entered or remained. And so what this does is it shifts the burden at trial away from the victim being the defendant in a case. No longer does the assaulted woman have to prove to a judge and jury that they tried to run away before they shot the assailant. That no longer has to happen in a stand your ground state. And so each of these are massive wins for a criminal defense attorney that has to stand up and argue, because you have to prove that your client avoided all legally obligated or exercised all legally obligated means to avoid using deadly force. And this, if you have to prove this, is a very difficult one to prove. So if you're in a duty to retreat state, then you have to prove that your client could not have retreated. An example of this, I'll give you an example of Nebraska. Anybody from Nebraska in the room? All right, hey, I see you got the Nebraska hat on too. You got some work to do. So Nebraska not only has a duty to retreat, Nebraska has a duty to surrender an item that an assailant is requesting before your use of deadly force. You have to demonstrate at trial that not only did you use all reasonable attempts to retreat, but also that you gave them what they were asking for before you shot them. Because if you didn't, then that can be used against you. You have a burden to prove that. That's a crazy standard, right? And so we have seen a growth of these stand your ground laws. In fact, I've got the statistics here. Since the year 2000, so in the last 25 years, there are currently 38 states that have stand your ground laws. By the way, the difference in the colors on the screen, The light blue are common law states, which means the courts have ruled that there's no duty to retreat. The dark blue are legislatively enacted, which means that they've passed laws. We prefer the statutory states, the ones where the laws have been enacted by the legislature. But to give you an idea, of the 38 that are there, and especially of the legislative states, of the 30 that are there, 26 of those have enacted those laws in the last 25 years. So these are modern things that we're doing to help defend people at trial. Now, because I just finished, just before me, a Florida resident gave their presentation. We've got several Florida residents here. I'm going to talk about Florida. So back prior to 2005, the standard in Florida at trial was, in order to justify the taking of human life, the accused must have used all reasonable means within his power and consistent with his own safety to avoid the danger and avert the necessity of taking a human life. Again, that was the standard you had to prove. So what it opened the door for was a prosecutor to show a security camera footage and say, oh, why didn't you run out the door behind you before you shot the person? Now, of course, in that use of force situation, as the defendant, you're saying, I didn't see the door. I saw the threat. But later, a jury is able to look at that and say, oh, well, yeah, the door was right there. And so when they go back in and they deliberate in their jury in the room, they're saying that kind of stuff. I would have just ran out the door. Well, it's because that jury member's never been involved in a use of force encounter and doesn't realize the tunnel vision aspect and what happens physiologically to the victim in a situation like that. So thankfully, Florida changed their laws. And after October 1st, 2005, they changed it so that they had a stand your ground statute. I want to talk about kind of what that did, and I've only got a couple minutes to do so. So after they did that, they established what's called a pretrial immunity procedure. And what that allows is basically for a defendant to petition a court for, before they go to trial, to have an immunity hearing. And these are big, and several states have started doing this. Utah is trying to get one passed right now. Carrie Ann Lisenby, who was here yesterday, is authoring that legislation, and Clark Aposian, who's here as well, is trying to push it through. The pretrial immunity, yes, I know Carrie Ann's still working on some tweaks to that. It's a great piece of legislation. In 2017, they shifted the burden. And so now what it says is, once the defendant makes a prima facie claim for self-defense immunity, the burden of proof by clear and convincing evidence is on the party seeking to overcome the immunity. Translated, it's not innocent until proven guilty. It's really innocent until proven really guilty is the standard. And that's the standard we want in self-defense cases, because again, we're putting the victim on trial here, and victims deserve better rights. Okay, what the results of this were is, after this happened, 67% of the time when somebody raises a stand your ground defense in Florida, they are found not guilty. They win that case. And of those cases, 79% of them would have previously involved an argument by the prosecutor that there was a duty to retreat. And so 79% of those cases could have looked very different had that law not been changed. And then I'm going to skip through a few slides. The second one is a presumption of reasonableness standard. Now, this is one we've still got a lot of ground to make up. Presumption of reasonableness laws, which are the dark blue states on that map, that starts with a presupposition that when somebody uses deadly force in specific circumstances, like within their home, they are presumed to have reasonably perceived a threat of imminent bodily injury or death. Meaning, the default is they were justified until the prosecution's able to overcome that. The burden isn't on the defendant to prove they were reasonably in fear of serious bodily injury or death. It starts with that presupposition, and now the defense has to overcome that. And that is a big, big win for a defense attorney at trial. And this is what one of those statutes look like. This is Utah's, which we have that here. And so it is a big win for states that have those. If you're in one of those light tan states, you've got some work to do with your legislature to get that done. And again, the second lesson I want to pass on to you is that a lot of these self-defense trials are won in the legislature. Arguing a case in Nebraska is significantly different than arguing it in Utah or Florida. And so those legislative initiatives can help. And finally, the last thing that I want to share with you, which I don't have time to go over, is, do you know who the biggest threat in a self-defense case is besides the person that was shot? So other than the attacker, the biggest threat to you is you. It's you. It's the stuff you say when you call 911. It's the stuff you say when the police show up. Now, you'll have a lot of instructors out there that'll say, okay, don't give a statement. Here's the reality. You will give a statement. You're going to. I've never worked on a case where the defendant didn't give a statement. In that instant, your brain switches and you're going to give a statement. So you need to work with, preparing what that statement would be and requesting your attorney. And we recommend giving an immediate public safety statement of, here's where my injuries are, here's where the attacker is, here's where the weapon is. I'd like to speak with my attorney. And that's in alignment with what law enforcement groups will recommend as well for their decompression period. All right, I have ran out of time. There is a lot more information I would cover, but I want to thank you for all you're doing for the Second Amendment. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
See these tall guys, right? Jeez. Before we bring up our last presenter and speaker for the afternoon, I want to say it's great to see so many people still here on Sunday morning. Like I said, these are the hardcore folks, and we've had a great morning of great speakers and presentations, and lots of information that we can take home to our home states and share with everyone there. So I would like to bring up our last speaker this morning. I'm going to turn everything over to him. He has many titles, but he's really the head of customer service, Adam Kraut.
Thank you. All right. Maybe. Well, good afternoon. I hope you all have enjoyed your time here at GRPC this year. If I could get this thing to work. There we go. All right. So my topic of presentation, the big 2A. Why? Because I didn't know I was going to talk to you about today, to be honest. It was a way of procrastination, and some of you saw me sitting in the lobby working on it. So in thinking about the culmination of what we've talked about here at GRPC this year, I thought it would be helpful to have a small recap, and that in particular on what the administration, Trump 47 administration has done, in addition to a little bit on the courts and then a little bit of what we're doing here at SAF. So Trump 45, a lot of talk about Second Amendment and gains in the Second Amendment world. And I got to be honest, I was kind of disappointed in what that administration did accomplish. Now, we go to Trump 47. Big difference in what we got. So what do we have? Well, we have a new ATF director, started with an acting ATF director of Kash Patel, and then we got Daniel Driscoll. So ATF has a new head appointed by this administration and not an interim acting director. DOJ, big changes at DOJ as well. You get, most notably to me anyway, and this is a subject near and dear to my heart, prohibited persons. Back when I was in private practice, I worked on a number of Second Amendment as applied challenges, and I also had the pleasure of litigating against Eric Soskin, who you heard from earlier today. This administration passed an interim final rule that dealt with prohibited persons, particularly nonviolent felons. And it already granted relief prior to that rule to Mel Gibson and 9 others. So that final rule, we will be publishing a comment in support of with some nitpicking on some of the things, but hopefully here in the near future, those who are convicted of nonviolent misdemeanors will have a pathway to restore their rights that doesn't involve seeking a permissive pardon. That's a multi-year process with no guarantee of success, or the other alternative of going into the federal courts and suing, spending a lot of money to do it, and again, no guarantee of success. And in fact, a lot of courts have said that, nope, sorry, no dice. You also get the United States Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Harmeet Dillon, and she's, as you heard earlier on Saturday, opened an investigation into the LA County, or the LA permit delays. And notably, abolished the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Who remembers that? Yeah, so gone. They've also changed litigation positions. So the Biden administration actively fought against Second Amendment related values on behalf of the federal government. So what do we get out of this administration? Well, you get a couple of interesting things. First, silencers are arms. Pretty crazy to me. Never thought I'd see the federal government arguing that. You also get them filing amicus briefs in support of the litigants challenging laws on their constitutionality. You see one, the first, in Wolford, challenge to Hawaii's carry ban, and Alan Beck in the back is the attorney who is litigating that case. That's up on cert. And they were supporting his challenge to Hawaii's law, saying that that law is unconstitutional. You also see them filing in the assault weapons ban cases, notably in the 7th and the 3rd Circuit, saying that these types of firearms are in fact protected arms under the Second Amendment. You see the DOJ rescinding Biden-era regulations, the zero tolerance policy one towards FFLs, and they've actually encouraged FFLs who had their licenses revoked under that or who surrendered it voluntarily to reapply for their FFL under this administration. And that's with more regulatory changes possible. There's plans to review the regulatory framework surrounding stabilizing braces and the definition of being engaged in the business of dealing in firearms. That was how they were getting all these people at gun shows who were selling some private collections and saying, well, you're engaged in the business. And here's an interesting thing when you look at what engaged in the business is, it's dealing with any kind of time for profit, and it's not very clear. They previously have published guidelines surrounding that, and I as a lawyer don't understand it, so you as a layperson, good luck. They also have plans to review other outdated or duplicative regulations that lack statutory support. They've issued an open letter, ATF, to lift existing restrictions on importing dual-use barrels. They've improved the Firearms and Ammunition Technology Division, or FATD's, responses time, and that's for industry to say, hey, can you classify this? Is this subject to the NFA? Is it a firearm? Things like that. Legislation. Well, the feds can't agree what color the sky is, but we did see a big fight when it was the one big beautiful bill, and we all know the outcome, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but what do you get out of that? Well, you get the tax on silencers and short barrel firearms and AOWs reduced to 0. Now, that set us up for litigation, which you have also heard about, and SAF has partnered with our friends at the NRA, the ASA, and over at FPC to file a lawsuit in Missouri challenging the continued inclusion of these items in the NFA. The federal courts, well, that's our bread and butter here at SAF. And right now, when you look at the federal courts, there's 3 big issues that are being litigated. Those are the who of the Second Amendment. And right now, that really is in the 18 to 20 realm. A number of cases dealing with purchase, possession, and carry. You get the what, the types of protected arms, those being namely assault weapons and magazines, and you get the where, sensitive places, post-Bruin. You saw the response. Supreme Court comes out, says, yes, there is a right to carry outside of the home, which they already said in Heller, by the way. And then you get states like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, California, and others saying, well, that's cool. You can carry a firearm, but we're just going to make all of these places off limits, basically being like, you can't really carry a firearm. And out of this litigation, we get circuit splits. In the 18 to 20 realm, you get the 3rd, 5th, and 8th striking down laws saying that they are unconstitutional, whether it's purchase or carry. And you get the 4th, the 10th, and the 11th circuits saying that these laws are constitutionally permissible. Now, when we look at the Supreme Court, what is it like? It likes circuit splits. In particular, you have the 5th Circuit Reese decision dealing with the 18 to 20 federal handgun ban challenge, a SAF case that we have partners with. And you have, right now, we have a cert petition up in the 4th Circuit, stemming from the 4th Circuit, Brown versus ATF, dealing with that same exact issue. 5th Circuit came, said the district court there said that the law was constitutional. 5th Circuit overturns it. I litigated the Brown case in the district court. We won. Go up to the 4th Circuit. 4th Circuit overturns. The district court says, no, actually, this is perfectly constitutionally permissible. Again, another circuit split. Maybe the Supreme Court will finally say that 18 to 20-year-olds are part of the people, which one would think because they're adults. Protected arms, we don't have a circuit split yet. There is a 3rd Circuit case that's going en banc that might give us that circuit split. And then, of course, sensitive places. Well, there's not really a circuit split per se, but you get circuits saying different places are either constitutionally permissible or not. The one thing that is pretty much uniform with one exception, that being Hawaii, is, as Costas likes to call it, the vampire rule. I think he invented the term, so I'll give him credit for that. But used to be, prior to Bruin, that you would have to post a no firearms allowed sign to prevent people from entering the property and being able to trespass them. Post Bruin and post these laws being passed, they flipped that on its head and said that you need to post that it's permissible to carry a firearm. And I don't know about you, but I know there were some business owners here, and I think a lot of times people try to separate their politics from their business because you're trying to make money. And so posting an affirmative, yes, you can carry a firearm on here is very different than saying no, because a lot of places would post no signage and not enter the fray. We're also litigating a number of ancillary issues. Can an arm be taxed? You have excise tax cases in Colorado and California. Can states require waiting periods on gun purchases? Are background checks on ammunition constitutional, even if they delay a purchase? Can states require guns to have claimed safety features before being sold to consumers in that state? Think of California's roster. Well, all those firearms have things like magazine disconnects and loaded chamber indicators. And do residents of one state have a right to carry in another? Well, up until recently, California didn't allow anyone who wasn't a resident to carry in their state. And that was by virtue of either reciprocity or non-resident permits. And we brought a lawsuit at SAF with our friends over at CRPA challenging that. And were able to secure a preliminary injunction that required the state to issue non-resident permits. That began in April. They have to comply with the training requirements, but now individuals have a pathway to lawfully carry a firearm in California for their own self-defense. So what's the state of the Second Amendment right now? Guys, we're gaining ground. We're in a good time in history, and we're still in the infancy of Second Amendment jurisprudence. States continue to look at ways to restrict rights after positive rulings, or they're planning for the future of what courts might do. And I'll give you an example of this. So this past year, Colorado was looking at passing an assault weapons ban, and they were going to do a flat ban. What they did ultimately end up with, and there was probably some political presidential aspirations that influenced this, was they went to a purchase permit model. The purchase permit model isn't simply just you need a permit. You need training. You have to pay fees. But if you look at how this is going to go, if the Supreme Court does in fact take one of the many assault weapons ban challenges heading its way, and the Supreme Court says these are in fact protected arms, what do you think the response from states is going to be? Simply lay down, let that happen? No, they're going to implement a new way to do it, and it's my belief that the purchase permit model is how they're going to attempt to make it difficult for people to acquire the types of arms that they're constitutionally entitled to have. Now remember, complacency kills, and we see this every time that there's a Republican president and a Republican-controlled Congress. Gun owners throw their hands up and say, it's fine. Well, it's not fine. Now is the time to put in the work, to gain the ground, to solidify victories long-term, and those that are not just simply the whims of the administration. And on top of that, as many of you that are with your state groups know, states don't follow what the feds do. Many of you are from blue states. Many of you are constantly dealing with issues where the legislature is constantly, continuously looking to restrict your rights. We can't stop paying attention, and we can't stop pushing forward just because Trump is in the White House. So here at the Second Amendment Foundation, what do? Well, litigate, communicate, educate. How do we litigate? You're all aware, we file new lawsuits. We win a lot of them. We don't always win, and when we don't, we continue to push to see where we can make that change. I typically tell people when I explain our litigation program, we have 3 buckets. We have our strategic litigation, where we look at how the landscape is today, and we say, how do we want the future to look tomorrow? And we plan litigation around that. I also say we have responsive litigation. So Bruin as the example, carry is now lawful and you have to do it. All those bills restricting where you can carry, well, we're now forced to file those lawsuits because there's a new law and we have to challenge it. And then there's what I love to call opportunistic litigation. It's when the person knocks on our door and says, hey, I've got this problem. And we look at it and say, yes, you know what? There is something we can do about it, and it's for the public good. Communication. We work hard to communicate with people to inform them of their Second Amendment rights, what we're doing, and what they can do to help. We do that through social media, we do it through emails, and we do it here at GRPC. And it's my hope that you all have learned something that you'll be able to take home and take action on. And finally, educate. In the same vein, through our communication, we're educating people. And I'm excited to announce that we're diligently working on an educational program that we're hoping to launch sometime Q1 2026. So stay tuned for that. And I'd just be remiss if I didn't mention, we couldn't do this without our staff here at SAF. We brought on Costas this year. He's somebody that I had personally been following for quite some time. I can't think of anyone better who can take complex legal jargon and make it understandable for the average person. So when I entered into conversation with him, it was exciting to bring him on board. We're working on our membership program to better communicate with you, not only about the things we're doing, but how we can help you. And systems, we're working to improve our systems here at SAF so we can continue to be the leading edge in the legal space and the educational space. So with that, I just want to thank all of our speakers who took the time out of their busy schedules to come, some of them across the country, to speak with all of you this weekend. And I want to thank you all for coming here and supporting our event and hopefully learning something while you were here. So with that, thank you for coming to GRPC in 2025, and we'll see you next year.